And it's great to see so many different groups and individuals from different countries, different locations who are connecting on the shared vision to reduce plastic pollution. So thank you very much for joining. And then I'm going to quickly, before we dive into things, I'm just going to pass over to Sarah from Ocean Conservancy, who has a few words before we begin. So Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces on the line, or names on the line, and some new ones as well. So I'm Sarah. I'm the outreach manager of the International Coastal Cleanup at Ocean Conservancy. And I just wanted to quickly, before we begin today's workshop, lots of fantastic information heading your way, but wanted to take a minute to just acknowledge the fact that we are in the midst of yet another very destructive hurricane and storm season. And we just want to let you know that Ocean Conservancy and University of Toronto Trash Team, we're here for you. We're on standby. If there's any way that we can help, if you have been particularly hit by storms this season, especially Fiona, we know has impacted a lot of our international coastal cleanup partners. So just keep that in mind. We know that the work that we do, the cleanup work especially, it is greatly impacted by these storms and this season in particular. So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and keep that in mind. Ping any of us today if you have more questions about that, or if you have ideas. And I think this will actually be particularly relevant since we know we've heard from so many partners in the region that when the storms come, the trash flows through waterways and channels. And so this could actually be a really informative workshop to hopefully help intercept some of that storm-related debris. So thank you, everyone. I'll pass it back over to you, Hannah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself before we begin. So my name is Hannah de Frond. I coordinate the International Trash Trap Network. I will be one of your facilitators for today, and I'll be presenting a bit later on as well. So a very quick bit about me. I have a master's in marine environmental management, and that's where my interest in plastic pollution originally began. I now moved to Canada. I spent a wonderful few years in Toronto working with Rochman, who's also here in her lab at the University of Toronto, working on microplastic pollution and plastic pollution as well, and volunteered with the University of Toronto Trash Team, who you will meet as well later on. And now I am very lucky to work between both the University of Toronto Trash Team and Ocean Conservancy to coordinate the network. Oops. So I also wanted to give a brief intro to the ITTN team, who you can see on your screens today, and you'll meet as well later. So because we are a collaborative program between the U of T Trash Team and Ocean Conservancy, we have many individuals who work together to make it a success. And so they're a great team to work with, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone throughout today's workshop. And last but not least, we also have Lakeram Singh joining us today. He's National Coordinator of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Guyana, and he'll be speaking a bit later on about their experience so far in Guyana with planning for and installing a trash trap for potentially multiple in their location in Guyana. So we'll look forward to hearing from him as well later on. Today's workshop is also made possible from the support of our collaborators and supporters. And so I just also like to take a moment to thank Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund for supporting the ITTN and allowing us to hold workshops such as this to meet all of you and to talk about this important issue together. So to bring us back to what we have coming up in today's workshop, here's a quick look at our main objectives for today. And these objectives include sharing the value of trash trapping devices and their role in fighting plastic pollution, motivating collaboration between stakeholders in the Caribbean, and sharing lessons from our experience and ultimately building a network of teams that are working independently towards a common goal of increasing our cleanup efforts, quantifying our impact collectively, and building trash trapping programs that engage the community and ultimately allow us to inform upstream management and solutions. And here's a closer look at what we've got coming up today. So once I conclude this intro, we'll move on to share more details about the International Trash Trap Network and our collective vision for trapping trash as part of the solution to plastic pollution, both locally and globally. And then we'll move on to hear from Lakeram about their litter monitoring and trash trapping work in Guyana, in Georgetown, in Guyana, followed by a quick 10-minute break. We'll then return. We'll be discussing the options out there for trash trapping technologies. What are some of the ones currently in use? Then we'll have a 30-minute break for lunch. And later on this afternoon, we'll resume to hear from Rafaela Gutierrez, one of the co-founders of the U of T trash team, who will be sharing the recipe for trash trapping success. And then after the break, we'll head into our final session where we'll have 3 different presentations on different aspects of the finer details of what makes a trash trapping project great. And those will be about ownership and operation, data collection and research, and outreach and communication. And then after this, we'll have a quick wrap up for the day. And then we'll say goodbye to everyone at the end. So we've crammed a lot into today's workshop, and I hope we all leave feeling inspired and motivated to trap trash together. And so I'm looking forward to it. And as you might have noticed, we do have time built in throughout the workshop for some Q&A sessions after we have presenters. And so our team will facilitate this by alternating between those who wish to ask questions out loud and those who wish to type them in the chat. Either is totally fine. And so it's when it's time for questions, we'll let you know. And if you want to ask a question out loud, you can raise your hand, which is on the reactions menu on Zoom. Once we point you out, you can unmute yourself and ask your question to the group. You can also share your thoughts and the conversation by tagging us on social media. So we'll keep an eye out for those today as well. So before we head straight into things, we want to turn the floor over to you. So I have a couple of questions for you, and feel free to just type your answers in the chat, what you think. So we're interested to hear what you're hoping to learn during today's workshop. Please let us know. I can begin. I'm looking forward to hearing from Lakeram about their experience in Guyana so far. Better and more successful ways to clean our island, absolutely. Looking forward to learning from CYN Guyana's experience with scoping out the right location for a trap, very important. Chelsea's excited to learn about how the program is going with Lakeram and also about what people are excited about when it comes to trapping trash. Looking forward to ways to trap trash, absolutely. We'll talk lots about that today. Different types of trash trapping techniques. Yeah, we will cover that as well. Great. Okay. And then we also are keen to know what type of group you represent. So please let us know. Is it an NGO? Is it a community group? Is it a school or a university? Or let us know what kind of group you're representing today. Just some final responses to the other question. Lakeram feels like a celebrity. And we're also looking forward to learning just about everything, which is fantastic. Okay, so we've got environmental NGO for type of groups that people are representing today. I expect there'll be more than one of those. University and NGO and network, Chelsea, yeah. Covering all bases. Antigua and Barbuda Red Cross, CYN in Guyana, also an environmental NGO. Great. Another environmental NGO. Perfect. So we all have very similar interests, it'll seem, and hopefully similar experiences that we can share between us. It's all great to see. Okay. So I'm going to move on. So thank you everyone for responding to our questions. It's actually really interesting to hear where everyone's coming from and what you're excited about. So thank you for that. So without any further ado, we'll get started. I have the pleasure of setting us off by giving an overview of the network and what we're all about. So I will end this presentation and move on to my next one now. So please bear with me while I change over. Okay. Oops. Oops. Okay, so to kick things off, as I mentioned, I'm going to give a brief overview of the International Trash Chat Network, what we're all about, how we formed, and our goal to connect local solutions to tackle global plastic pollution. So for a bit of background, as I'm sure you're all aware, plastic pollution is a global issue. It litters the entire globe from top to bottom and from the surface of the ocean to the deep sea. And by weight, most of the plastic is large pieces that we can see in the above photo. But by count, most of it is microplastics. And because our plastic waste has become so ubiquitous, microplastics have also become pervasive, cycling in our water cycle, our global dust cycles, and arguably as parts of the carbon cycle too. So both large and small are an issue. And for impacts, we know that large litter can choke and entangle and smother wildlife. We've also now learned that microplastics are leading to measurable risks in our oceans and freshwater environments, and that if we continue to allow concentrations to increase, that risk will become more widespread. And so as a result, there is clear evidence that it's time to act now. And the good news is that across the world, action has begun. Many of us are involved in that action already. And so the global movement really picked up in around 2015, when the world agreed that the figure of 8 million tons of plastic entering our oceans every year was not acceptable and not okay. So this estimate came from a famous study published by Jenna Jambeck. And to this day, we hear this number cited in many presentations and studies. However, it's now outdated and we have a new estimate. So in 2020, we used a newer model and published a study that predicted that between 24 to 34 million tons of plastic waste was emitted into aquatic systems in the year 2020. And so this is obviously 3 to 4 times the previous 8 million tons number. And this is because we included emissions from freshwater environments, so rivers and lakes as well as oceans, but also due to an increase in production, consumption and emissions of plastics since the previous study was published. And so this model was used to project into the future to determine how much plastic emissions are predicted to change under different scenarios for mitigation. And what we found was, if you follow the yellow line on the figure on the left, we are headed towards as much as 90 million tons of plastic emissions per year by 2030, so less than 10 years away, if we continue business as usual, which is a bit scary, but luckily the world has not agreed upon this future, but we do have a lot of work to do. And so this work that we have to do falls into 3 general categories for mitigation. And these include plastic waste reduction, which includes bans on single-use plastics and the reuse or recycling of plastics so that they stay in the value chain. It includes waste management, so the collection of waste to be brought to a management facility. And finally, it includes cleanup, which is the strategy we'll be focusing on today. And so when we looked in our study at the efforts that would be required to make a meaningful difference to plastic emissions globally, we concluded that from our study that there was no one-size-fits-all strategy to plastic pollution, and we really do need locally informed solutions. We also agree that it should not be the only part of the solution, but our model suggested that waste reduction and sustainable management are critical, but cleanup is also an important part of the equation. And so we actually need all three types of strategies happening simultaneously to achieve global targets for reducing plastic emissions. And as we're all pretty aware, I feel like we're all very involved in this, a significant amount of plastic waste has already accumulated in the environment, but community cleanups around the world are collecting millions of pounds of trash every year. But to make a measurable difference now into the future, we need to increase our cleanup efforts worldwide by orders of magnitude. And so the question is, how can we best do this? And that's where we believe trash traps come in. So trash traps are technologies that are designed to clean up and divert plastics and other anthropogenic pollutants from our waterways. And they can supplement cleanup efforts by running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they also are able to collect waste items from large macro debris, such as the bottles you see in the top right photo, to small microplastics that are often challenging to collect by hand, such as the one you can see in the left side of the screen. So because there are also now a wide variety of devices available, which is a great thing, this means that there are some options so that a suitable device can be chosen for each scenario and waterway. So for example, in a large river channel full of floating trash, a trash wheel might have the greatest impact, or in a harbour front slip full of floating microplastics, sea bins may offer the best solution for cleanup. And they're just a couple of examples, and we'll dig much more into those a bit later on. And so the obvious primary benefit of trash traps is to capture and divert waste, but they have other benefits too. They're a great focal point for public education and awareness of plastic pollution. And so by talking to the public about how they work and what they capture, we can demonstrate that plastic pollution is not a faraway issue. It's happening right now, right on our doorsteps, and cleanup is one of the ways that we can manage it locally. Also, trash traps can act as sampling tools for data collection. So by understanding what we're capturing in the traps and what the most common waste items are in our waterways, we can then understand the sources of these waste items and inform upstream solutions and policy. And so all of these things can happen on a local scale, but with different projects happening simultaneously, collectively, they're part of a global solution. And so in realizing these values of trash traps, the ITTN was born. So we launched in March last year, and the aims of the ITTN are to exponentially increase global cleanup efforts and to quantify our collective impact as part of the international coastal cleanup. So just as community groups collect trash and clean up data each year with the ICC, we do the same using trash traps. We also aim to bring together local stakeholders to build trash trapping programs that will not only clean up our waterways, but will engage the community and collect valuable data to inform upstream solutions. To measure the success of the trash trapping projects in the network, we've developed harmonized data collection methods that are easy to use. And we have 2 different protocols that groups can use depending on their time, people power, and goals. So the simple protocol is carried out each time the device is emptied. Using this method, groups can document the weight of the debris they're collecting. We also have a detailed protocol that's carried out multiple times a year to capture how waste changes across the seasons. And using this method, groups can document the mass and the count of large waste items and microplastics or tiny trash. And so this method allows us to quantify the different types of litter to then inform sources. To record data, groups in the network have very similar options to the International Coastal Cleanup. They can use paper data cards, or they can opt to use, at the moment, our free data tracker app. But those familiar with Ocean Conservancy's CleanSwell app for recording cleanup data, we hope to have trash trapping data submission on CleanSwell very soon as well. Once you've reported your data, we summarize it at the end of each calendar year. And we also share local reports on trash trapping achievements. So that includes the total weight of debris captured and the top items recorded for each group within the network. And so we wanted to do this because by summarizing data for each group, we hope to make it as easy as possible for groups in the network to use this data to inform local policies around preventing plastic pollution, and also for other things such as educational programs and outreach. We also summarize the network-wide achievements, and this data is included within the ICC reports each year. And This data is also publicly available within Ocean Conservancy's TIDES database, where it can be used by anyone, any members of the public, for research to policy on local and global scales. As I mentioned before, we know that trash traps are very interesting and they're great to look at, and so they can be a great focal point for local education. And so to assist with this, we've developed posters that groups can use to put by their traps to draw attention to them. And we've also developing activities such as a guided waste characterization that can be adapted for different locations, traps, age groups, and this creates opportunities for hands-on experiences for members of the public, and an opportunity for communities to understand their local sources and solutions for plastic pollution. Within the network that we have already, we've also got some groups that have gotten a bit creative with this. So an example is this photo of Inspector Sebin, who lives in Tobermory in Canada. He's very, very cute. There's 3 of them around the harbour front there. So they're triplets and they get a lot of attention on their harbour front. So you can get really creative with this and make it really fun as well. Finally, we see the network as a platform to learn from each other and to avoid reinventing the wheel as trash trapping efforts grow. So currently groups can share their data and connect via our social media channels. So we have an ITTN Facebook group that you're all invited to join, and you can connect on there and ask questions and seek advice from other groups who might be doing similar things or who have experience using any traps that you're interested in. We also hold regional workshops such as this one with the purpose to facilitate knowledge sharing among groups in specific regions where interest in trash trapping has grown. We'll share information on joining the network throughout today's workshop. We've made it very simple and easy to do so you can contact us anytime via our email address. You can also download our resources via our webpage. And we have these available in multiple languages as well. And as soon as you're ready and you have the trash trap installed, you can begin using our resources, collect harmonized data, and connect with other groups globally via the network. And so after my presentation, I have a few links that you can follow, and I'll share them in the chat in just a moment. That's it from me for now. Oops. So thank you very much, everyone. And we have up next, we have Chelsea Rochman from the U of T Trash Team. So Chelsea is co-founder and head of operations and program lead of scientific program and application at the U of T Trash Team. She's also assistant professor in ecology at the University of Toronto and scientific advisor to Ocean Conservancy. And she's been researching the sources, sinks, and ecological implications of plastic debris for more than a decade. In addition to her research, she also works to translate science beyond academia. So she's going to talk a bit about the Trash Team and their work now. So over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Hannah. Can you hear me okay and see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, first of all, thanks everyone for coming. I'm super thrilled to share the International Trash Trap Network with you, and also about your interest in potentially joining our network and trapping trash with us. So I'm going to talk a bit about our own local trash trapping program, which informs a bit of the history of the International Trash Trap Network. So I'm going to talk about our work, trapping trash, tagging trash, and tracking trash, oh my, which is all basically informed by our goal to eventually start trapping trash. So I'll talk about that. So who is the U of T Trash Team? So the U of T Trash Team is a community outreach group or a program really, that sits within the University of Toronto, and we operate very much like an environmental NGO. We're a group of about 85 students, as well as 5 full-time staff that work on community outreach, education, and solutions-based research. Our goal is to increase waste literacy in our community while reducing plastic pollution in our ecosystems. When we first started about 5 years ago, we were inspired by Mr. Trash Wheel, who is one of the famous trash traps around the world. And we had an idea to basically start a community outreach program that had a trash trap as sort of the centerpiece, which would inspire and inform some of our outreach programs and our solutions-based research programs. And so we had an idea to get a trash trap. We wanted a trash wheel. We wanted it to be a raccoon because in Toronto, that is our mascot. Our raccoons love our waste bins, and much of City of Toronto's apparel does not have a raccoon, or all has a raccoon on it. And so we had this dream of creating a trash bandit. We also really had a dream of working locally, but with the idea of thinking globally about this global problem. And so we wanted to work on local projects that also informed global solutions, which is a bit where the International Trash Trap Network comes in, which I'll talk about later. So we didn't end up getting a trash wheel that is a raccoon, unfortunately, because it wasn't the best type of trash for our location. Instead, we got other types of traps and started other programming, which I'll talk about today. And that's our Fighting Floatables project that we do on Toronto's waterfront. So if you go to the QR code, you can learn more about our program. I'm going to tell you all about it today. One of the really important things I think about working on these types of programs, because they are large, is to work with many stakeholders and also to work with the stakeholders in order to understand their goals, which helps inform, again, the type of trap and where the trap might go. So we work with many different stakeholders on the waterfront, which includes government, industry, and other local NGOs, which includes the City of Toronto in terms of government as well as provincial. We ended up getting sea bins as our first trash traps, and then we got litter traps soon to follow. The sea bins float in the harbor on slips, and the litter traps are just under the storm drains on the street before the water enters the harbor. We used GPS tagged satellite bottles to understand how trash moves around the harbor in order to inform where we put the trash traps, but that is not fully necessary. You can also do visual audits and skimming just to first understand the litter problem. Today, many years later, from our initial brainstorming, which was in 2017, we have 11 sea bins and 10 litter traps along our waterfront. Here's just a map to show you where they are. Our litter traps are the purple dots here, and our sea bins are the pink dots, and they are around the waterfront. There's not one on the island this year, but there was last year, and some in an outer harbor marina nearby. Our trash trapping program is really fueled by the help of summer interns who we hire to work full-time from about May through August to empty, quantify, and characterize the litter in our bins. So our work is truly fueled by students. And of course, this work can be fueled by whoever it makes sense within your own program to do the work of the daily emptying, as well as the quantification and characterization. But again, because we wanted to work local and be able to inform global, when we created our protocols to quantify and characterize the debris, we did it in such a way that we were trying to make sure it was replicable around the world. So we went to a local hardware store and we purchased equipment and created protocols that we thought could be carried out by school groups, by people at a university like us, in our case, maybe by city operators, by people at an NGO, you name it, something that would be accessible to all the different groups that might be trapping trash. And we did this because we think the data collection is incredibly important. So if you quantify and characterize what you collect in your trap every day, at the end of each season, you can basically report on your impact. How much pollution were you able to divert with the use of your traps in both the weight of the debris and also the count of the debris, which is important to think about the volume of what you removed. And then also we get information on the types of debris that we're reducing. And so when Hannah talked about the different solutions to plastic pollution, one of them is source reduction through upstream solutions. And of course, cleanup is another one of them, and waste management is a third. So we think that by characterizing what we collect, we can inform upstream solutions. And so, for example, you can see what we collect, probably pretty similar to what you collect in cleanups. We have a lot of cigarette butts, we have a lot of plastic fragments and bottle caps and styrofoam and balloons and stir sticks. And then for our tiny trash, we get a lot of hard fragments and foam fragments, but we also get a lot of pre-production pellets. And those are the starting point or the building blocks for the production of plastic. So they're the little beads produced, melted down, and made into the product. And we use this information to inform the other part of our programming, which is solutions-based research. So our trash trapping program fuels outreach because we do cleanups and we do public trash trap dives on the waterfront. It fuels our actual cleanups, and then it also fuels our solution-based research. So based on what we find in our traps, we have projects that are relevant to trying to reduce the input of these items upstream so that eventually maybe one day we need less cleanup or less trash traps. So for us, these focus on foam, pellets, cigarette butts, and single-use foodware. And I'll just quickly walk you through what these are. So for foam, we find a lot of styrofoam in our traps. It didn't all look like takeout containers. Some of it looks like it might be from somewhere else. We suspected construction. We thought that construction foam might have bromines in it by the addition of flame retardants to building materials. So first, we tested a lot of different foam items, including a library of construction foam, and found that the construction foam had bromines and the other foam tended not to have bromines. Then we went out and sampled foam from beaches in the area as well as from the local waterways. And we found that about 50% of the foam we're finding has bromines, suggesting construction as a source and allowing us to work with governments and the municipality on that source. On our pellet project, we're working directly with the plastic industry and the provincial government. And here we're trying to understand just how many pellets are coming down rivers in our area. Then we're putting in trash traps actually at the industries to try to stop it at the source, to be able to capture their capital, have an understanding of how much money they're losing down the drain and to prevent it from going into the watershed and seeing whether that makes a difference downstream, trying to use that information to inform upstream solutions to pellet loss. We had a really fun campaign this summer called Kicking Plastic's Butt. This was trying to reduce cigarette butts on our waterfront. We had an inkling that most of the public didn't realize cigarette butts are plastic pollution. So we did an arts-based educational campaign in order to try to get that message across. And we did this through visual art posters that we had on streetcar stalls that you can see on the left. We did some video with some locally famous TV stars, the Water Brothers, to basically quiz people on whether they knew cigarette butts were plastic, and almost everyone did not. And during our campaign and before our campaign, we quantified cigarette butts and did actually see a reduction during the campaign, which suggests that maybe that educational outreach was making a difference in that exact region where we were doing the education. And finally, another project that's really exciting because it directly applies to policy occurring right now in Toronto is working on reducing single-use plastic items through foodware, through restaurants. And so Rafaela, who's here today, is leading a project trying to understand what do businesses need in order to be successful in reducing the amount of single-use plastic that they serve to customers. So first, she's trying to understand what are their goals, and the environment seems to be one of them, and what do they need in order to succeed. And this is directly in collaboration with another NGO, and then trying to understand from the city how this can be most helpful. Now, our trash trapping program started with Ports Toronto. Then we started working with a group in Vietnam, MCD, where they were trapping trash. And then the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup was sort of initiated from watching our work, being interested in the success of it and trying to expand it across the Great Lakes. And so this led us to thinking, hey, maybe we should think about an international trash trap network that operates under the International Coastal Cleanup with Ocean Conservancy in order to bring together lots of people who are cleaning up around the world to scale up our effort through trash traps and work together in order to quantify a large impact and inform upstream solutions. So that's where we are today. Of course, we work with lots of collaborators, so I want to thank and acknowledge them. And I want to thank you again for being here, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And then I'm going to introduce Allison. Many of you know Allison Schutes, so she goes without need for introduction. But I want to turn it over to her to talk about our collaboration together on the network.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Let me get my screen up here. And while I do that, I am going to apologize in advance. I am home with my 1-year-old today. So it tends to be when I start talking, so does she. So we might have a visitor or some noise. So my apologies in advance for any distractions that that causes. So let's try to get this into PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see the screen.
Looks great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. Perfect. So, I mean, I think we all know a bit about why we're here, right? Like the ocean is facing so many different issues. But at the crux of it, you know, at Ocean Conservancy, we kind of take the viewpoint that we're taking too much out and we're also putting too much in, both, which really is creating kind of this uncertain ocean future. So Ocean Conservancy is working at the intersection of a bunch of different issues, trying to address the very health of our ocean from more of a holistic approach. So obviously we work on the issue of plastics, which is why we're all here today, but that is not the sole work of Ocean Conservancy. We also work on fisheries issues, working up in the Arctic, in regionally specific areas such as Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, ocean planning, and obviously the impacts that climate change is having on our ocean and obviously just our planet writ large. So, you know, again, why are we here? Why Ocean Conservancy? Again, I think a lot of us are very familiar with each other, so I apologize for kind of probably going into some things that you all already know. But Ocean Conservancy is a US-based nonprofit, and we just celebrated our 50th year. We have folks scattered pretty much throughout the United States in a couple different offices, but most of us are based in here in Washington, D.C., which is where I am. But we do really relish the fact that we get to work with such amazing partners all over the world, and really be able to kind of join people together, whether it's 7IMDC that just took place in Korea, or, you know, really just trying to go and visit all sorts of different communities all over the world. And we get to feel so lucky because we get to be able to do that, to interact with partners like you, to address this very issue, the issue of plastics and why we're all here today. I don't think this is probably a shocking picture to you all. Obviously, the people we interact with, though, on a daily basis, this is pretty much a shocking picture. I don't think a lot of people see beaches and coastlines that look like this in their everyday life. Some people do, some people don't. And so, you know, that's really what brings us all together here today. And again, we're just so excited to be able to work with partners and incredible organizations to really take cleanups to the next level. And how can we use kind of the evolution of what we've learned over the last 30, 40, 50 years on the different elements that are affecting our ocean, and how can we continue to evolve and continue to make sure that we're together having the most impact, beneficial impact, for our ocean. So I think, again, we all know the incredible positive impacts of cleanups. We know the data, we know what we're finding on beaches and waterways working with volunteers. And so to be able to transition and evolve the International Coastal Cleanup Network to incorporate some of these technological solutions through trash trapping is something that we're really excited to be able just to be a part of, and bring in folks from all across the world to figure out how we learn more. How is the trash that's winding up in these traps similar or different than what we're all finding together on beaches with volunteers? Again, these data really speak for themselves, right? 17.5 million volunteers, hundreds of millions of pounds over the course of 37 years. And the one element, this slide always just, I use this slide obviously quite a bit, but it's always so impressive to me, is the number of countries, yes, but then the number of items that have been, and collected is maybe actually not the best word that I should be using on this slide, but the number of items recorded. And that just speaks to the enthusiasm and the passion and the ability for individuals, members of the public, your organizations, all of our organizations working together. 413 million items individually recorded really shows the power of data and the fact of what we can learn from these data working together. And so obviously none of this would be possible without working through the network and throughout these partnerships. And so from Ocean Conservancy, we really just are so incredibly grateful about these incredible partnerships and each of the work that we do with each of you individually, your organizations. If we haven't worked together in the past, welcome. We are so thankful that you were here, took some time out of your day. What is today? Wednesday? Took your time out of your Wednesday took some time out of your Wednesday to join us here today to learn a little bit more about kind of, again, this evolution from just beach cleanups to really figuring out how, again, we can continue to have this impact and really help benefit our ocean. And so these partnerships really for us is at the crux of what we do, not just as part of the International Coastal Cleanup, but at Ocean Conservancy writ large. We just really are so thankful for these partnerships and this work that we do together. Because at the end of the day, each of us, and especially each of you, are leaders in your own communities, in your own regions, and this work would not be possible without you. So thank you again for joining us. This would not be possible without you, and we can't wait to really open this next chapter into the International Coastal Cleanup and Ocean Conservancy's work by working with the University of Toronto and all of these incredible partners all around the world to figure out, again, how can we continue to have impact when volunteers can't be out on beaches in the middle of the night? Trash traps really provide this amazing opportunity for us to continue to have an impact and collect debris and then also document what we're finding. So thanks for letting me ramble on for a little while and for having my little coworker join us. So again, thanks. I'll stick around. Here's my contact information if anyone needs it. But can't wait to continue this journey, and thank you again.
Thank you, Allison, for that great presentation. Thank you. So we now have, I think we have a few minutes in case anyone wants to ask any questions about what we just spoke about to either me or Chelsea or Allison. So we'll stick around for a few and hold on in case anyone has any thoughts or questions for any of us. Oh, we have a raised hand. So Shia, yeah, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask a question.
All right, thank you very much. So from observing everything that has been said thus far, my question is, do these traps, would they have a secondary, say, function? Like, for example, we're plagued by the sargassum seaweed. So would that be able to aid in that process as well?
Yeah. You want me to take that one, Hannah?
Sure, go for it, Chelsea.
So Shay, that's a great question. And I smile and giggle a little bit because we capture a lot of macrophytes in our traps as well. So in Toronto, we have a lot of macrophytes, some of which are invasive, and we capture a lot of them. And we also find that the more plants we get, the more garbage we get because the plastic tends to get entangled in the plants. So it does definitely aid in the removal of seaweed and weeds. And if they're invasive and they're weeds you want out of the water anyway, that's great. If they're a plant that you care about and then it becomes a problem for the ecosystem, then that may be a reason to move the trap. But definitely they serve many purposes. Sea bins also come with a pad for oil. So if there's oil in the harbor, they also soak up some of the oil in the water.
Oh, that's very good.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes, that was my question because I live in Beckway. I'm a part of Action Beckway Incorporated. And when I drive around the island, it's blanketed with the seaweed till it's created a bank in one of our beaches. Mm. So while listening, I just thought maybe this could have a secondary function and aid with the mitigation of the seaweed invasion. Mm-hmm.
And each trap is different, so you might consider the technology that does best at both tasks.
Well, that's true. Well, I'm about to do some research on it because honestly, this is piquing my interest a lot.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. All right, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you very much.
All righty then.
Yeah, and we'll be speaking a little bit more as well about all the different types of traps. So hopefully that is useful for you in thinking about what might be most suitable for the situation with the seaweed as well. Okay. We'll hold on in case anyone has any other questions before we move on. We have a few more minutes.
If not, we get to hear from Lakeram, who feels like a star because we all said we want to learn more.
I know, I think everyone's waiting for, ready for Lakeram to speak. Okay. I think we can just move on to Lakeram if everyone's ready. So again, thank you, Chelsea and Allison, for speaking. And we will move on. I'll pass it over to Rafaela, who is going to introduce Lakeram for this next part of the workshop. So over to you, Rafa.
Thanks, Hannah. Can you hear me and see me okay? Yes, I can see myself. Okay, excellent. So I have a very fun job to introduce here Lakeram Singh. Hopefully I pronounce your name correct right now. He's the National Coordinator of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Guyana. He is working on his Master of Science in Sustainable Development with a focus on land and water management. He has been also a teacher for the past 6 years, teaching geography and environmental science to students in grade 8, 10, 11, and 12. And today he will tell this a little bit about the story of their trash trapping project from planning through to present day. So we are very excited to hear what all about his project. So Singh, the floor is yours. You can start your presentation.
All right, thanks so much. Just let me know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. Are you able to see it properly on your end?
Yes, yes, I can see your slide.
All right, good. So, well, good morning to you. Good morning to Hannah. Good morning to all the members of the coordinating team this morning, and of course, our esteemed attendees. My name is Lakeram Singh. I'm the National Coordinator of CYEN, that's the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. I'm actually just into my maybe just my second month of the second month into the third month of being the national coordinator. So a lot of things yet to come. Has been a bit challenging with work and so on, but I'm looking forward to it all. So yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm from Guyana. However, I'm coming to you direct from Dominica. I'm here for work for the week. So what I will ask, just ask that inform you that I'll do is to take my camera off because the internet seems to be a bit sketchy. So I'm just gonna take it off for the remainder of the presentation, and probably when we have the question and answer, I'll put it on back again if that's okay.
Lakeram, I can actually your internet is working super well right now. It's up to you. If you want to try, keep your cameras on.
Yeah, that's probably now, but when you guys were speaking, it was breaking up a bit. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, up to you.
All right, so I'm going to take the camera off until I finish the presentation, and I'll put it on back when we have questions. All right. All right. All right, so of course, just as a bit of context, of course, Guyana is not an island. As much as we are classified as being part of the Caribbean, when we hear Caribbean, we think of the Caribbean islands. Guyana is located in the northeastern coast of South America. We have a land area of about 83,000 square miles, where we have almost, well, over 65% of our land mass is primary forest. However, we do have a very long Atlantic coastline, and our geographical location affords us many different biomes and so on. So we have our coastal marine biomes where we have a lot of mangrove wetlands along the coastline, which give way to our freshwater wetlands just immediately inland of the coast. We have our intermediate savannas where We do some amount of agriculture and cattle rearing. We have our forested highlands, where we have flat-topped Tepui mountains. And then we have our interior savannas going west and southwest towards Brazil. Right, and in terms of our demography, we have a population of over about 800,000. Pretty small for the landmass, but however, importantly enough, approximately 90% of our population live on the coastline, which you can see there on the map depicted by those colored red dots. And so, as you can see, there's almost no space between us and the ocean. And of course, we are, if you don't know anything about Guyana, we are a very multi-ethnic population. In terms of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, we have been registered in Guyana since 1996. Our organizational structure is, as you see there, because we are actually a regional organization. We do have a steering committee, a regional steering committee. The Office of the Executive Coordinator sits in Barbados, and the national chapters are governed by the structure at the bottom, where you have our national coordinator, the exec committee, and of course our individual members. We do have like national advisors, which are persons that are in key government, not necessarily government, but key work in key areas that would help us to manage and tailor our activities. Our main events in main activities in Guyana, coastal cleanup activities are a big thing for us. Awareness and advocacy building in schools, communities, via radio and television. Those are things that we do quite a bit. Just this year we had, and I think in a previous forum I did mention, we did go into schools just in April of this year. We had a pretty good session speaking about marine pollution, and we did actually speak a bit on the trash traps in some of the schools, just to give them an idea of what technologies are out there should they decide that they would like to get involved. I think we do have coming up, we're trying to do another session probably before Christmas, hopefully, probably looking at water quality and how our disposal practices impact water quality in our communities and the environment at large. All right. As relates to the trash trap in Guyana, and I must give kudos to our previous national coordinator, Kiefer Jackson. She is the one that really jumped on this proposal and kind of roped me into it. But it's been going pretty well so far. We did have quite a few challenges, but we're still committed to the process. In terms of getting the conversation started around trash trap for us here in Guyana, of course, it started out with, I can't remember who introduced us, if it was Allison or Sarah that introduced us to Hannah and the trash trap, and did have a few conversations about it, and we started to do a little more research into it, and it seems like a very effective solution to the issue of plastic pollution and marine pollution in general. And so the first thing was that we had engagement between ITTN and Ocean Conservancy, and just to bring us up to speed on what the network was about, what the process was, what the devices were, and how they operate. Locally here, we have been having conversations more recently, more often with the Environmental Protection Agency, because they have something similar, well, not similar in terms of its impact. They have another project that's have the same scope. Of course, we did initiate a conversation with the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, because they are the ones that manage the infrastructure as it relates to our drainage networks in the city. We have the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority, and of course the Mayor and City Council and the Neighborhood Democratic Councils. Those are our national stakeholders that we mapped, and they have a pretty, in terms of benefit, well, in terms of influence, they have the maximum influence on the project because they are the ones that would guide, in terms of building codes and the different standards that they use, where a structure like this could go, what are the contingencies, what are the different action plans that have to be put in place to deal with its erection, its maintenance, its what is the exit strategy for it should anything happen, that kind of thing. And of course, a large part of it, civil society. CYEN has always had good participation from other youth groups, especially those coming out of the schools and the University of Guyana. And just 2 weeks ago, we had the International Coastal Cleanup, and we did see quite a number of community members coming out to the cleanup, as well as religious groups and some other youth and volunteer networks right here in Guyana. Another aspect of the trash trapping, as I mentioned, is where are you putting this trash trap? And we did do quite a few visual audits of various areas. And I'm going to just share a different screen now just to give you an idea of the, I'm just going to, okay. I'm just going to share this Google Maps screen with you so that just to give you a spatial sense of what we were looking at. Let me know, please, if you're seeing the screen.
Not yet. Yes, now we can see your map.
All right, cool. So this is just Google Maps. So I just pinpointed the sites here because I think it gives a better sense of what we were considering. So we do, so all this area here is that you see here is Georgetown, the capital city, within and its environs here, more or less suburban areas around these places. And this would be, in terms of the first thing that we thought of, like accessibility and visibility. Like when you put down a trash trapping device, you want to ensure that you yourself could access it, or other persons could access it, or persons who are part of the team could access it when it comes to removing the trash, recording it, and so on. And that's why we decided, let's look at Georgetown, because you have all of our stakeholders here. And if should they want to play a part, it will be easier for this to be a pilot project. For the we looked at here is but let me just add that most of the drainage in Guyana is through their historical canals and so on that are where their flow into the river or the ocean is controlled by what the Dutch called kokers. I think most persons just call them an outfall or something like that, or kokers. Not sure what name other persons would use, but so this first site here is an area, it's a canal we call the Sussex Street Canal. There is a coker here, and as you can see all around, it's pretty much an industrial site. Here we have a lot of wharves and docks and construction, producing facilities and warehouses and so on. And however, the community, the water from a lot of communities, as you can see here. And I mean, being Guyanese and other Guyanese would, if they're on the call here, would probably agree that there's always a lot of plastic pollution there in the canal because of persons' habits and so on. I guess they just see it, I'm not sure how, but they see it fit to pollute. And a lot of plastic bottles end up in the, however, the first challenge here for us, well, when I visited the area, is the fact that the place that I was looking at to erect such a device, which is right here where the cursor is that one of the companies there actually built like a covered parking lot over the trench, so it's covered. I mean, there's still passage underneath for the water, but it's covered. And so that would have been the ideal spot to put the device. Further up here, not so much ideal because of access issues. And here where the pin is not, the space there is not big enough, and it would interact too much with the actual coker and drainage pump, and that would prove to be an issue. However, because of the concrete there, it would be simple to anchor a device because you with the right tools, it's actually might be a bit more simple. The second site is, however, there is less obstruction from built structures around the area. As you can see, the embankments are still pretty much dirt, right, mud. And so to erect something there might be less intrusive in terms of the activities that go on in the area. But that waterway too as well usually see a lot of plastic pollution, plastic bottles floating and so on into the river. And then the third site, which seems to be the most probable site, it's another canal that leads into the river. However, you know, it's easier to access the area, and it's pretty safe because another thing we have to consider is vandalism. You know, you could have vandalism of the device. And I'll show you the device that we plan on using a bit later. But the device, it looks nice, right? It really looks good, and persons you don't know. They might see things on it that they could use for their own purposes, and then they might want to destroy it, right? And so my reason for maybe looking at this site there is security. We have quite a few working offices around the area with security and the kind of thing. I'm not saying that that's the solution. That's a solution. That just having security is kind of like a solution, but it's a bit more an active area. So that's another possible site for the device that we were going to look at. We did think about countryside areas moving along the coast, but then we're faced with the high tides of the Atlantic, which can be very destructive in our case. And one of the things that when I spoke with one of the stakeholders is that by putting a device like that at one of our major drainage outfalls like this one here, you know, could be a problem because it will aid a lot of deposition on the ocean side, which could affect the drainage capacity of the canal. So there's so many things to take into consideration when you are when you decide to put down a device like that. And we usually get you know, pretty heavy destructive tides coming off the Atlantic. And you know, in terms of the device's integrity and our safety to really get to the device and record the data, you know, it would be a bit of a challenge. So looking at the waterways that enter into the river are our best bet. So I'll just reshare my PowerPoint. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, cool. So in terms of the Guyana context, also why we decided to look at the capital is that it's a populated area and it has approximately 300 to 400,000 persons commuting to it or through it daily. And, you know, that's part of the reason why you have so much garbage buildup. And of course, we do have a lot of uncovered waterways. And then the issue really is the indiscriminate littering and dumping by citizens. And, you know, we're hoping that in terms of visibility, by putting a device in an area such as this, like in the picture below, where persons can see it. This picture was taken at the Lamaha Canal, which is the name of the canal that I was looking at. And we do have a lot of traffic. There's a roadway right along here, where people could see the device in action. And there are a lot of schools and so on along the area where students could see the device in action as well. So yeah, that was some of the things that we had to consider. So this is a device that we're thinking of using, which is called the Bandalong, and it's a floating device. It's anchored, and it collects the debris into that trash bin that you see there, and that's pretty. It's safe for us. I mean, we could always pull that device closer to the shore and empty the trash out. I know in the information that ITTN would have provided to us, you could either use like a crane or something to lift the basket out. But I think in our situation, because we have direct access to the canal itself, utilizing various green spaces, we could actually pull that closer to the shore and actually get to empty the trash and record what's inside. Right. And another thing I wanted to touch on, the persons might ask, why should they get involved, or like, what is the sustainability of something like this? And from a regional perspective, well, nationally at first, I think all countries in the region, in the Caribbean region, actually have national development policies that focus on pollution and the socioeconomic benefits of tackling the issue of pollution. And in terms of upscaling, there is the Cartagena Convention that I think all of the Caribbean countries actually signed on to this convention. And, coming out of that was the protocol on land-based sources and activities. And currently there is a big project that's out there that can be an avenue for upscaling this activity. If you think that it might be expensive for you to do, there is this project called Prevention of Marine Litter in the Caribbean Sea that is being unfolded in some countries of the Caribbean. That could be a nice entry point for you to consider getting more funding for activities such as this. And part of it, why I brought it up too, is because part of the project mentions innovation. Innovative solutions to plastic pollution, and I think the trash trap as a device, as a framework, as a system, is really an innovative solution, a participatory solution to the issue of plastic pollution in the Caribbean. Yeah, I think that's the end of the my slideshow, my PowerPoint. Sorry. Yeah, I think did I cover everything? I think so.
Yes.
But I'm free. So, but thanks everyone for listening. I'm free to answer any questions if you have any. Thanks.
Thanks, Lakeram, was amazing. We learned a lot. I'm very excited about the Bandalong and see the results of your research. So now we are open for questions. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself, or type in the chat. Anything you want. Lakeram, you can turn on your camera and your mic. Yes. I forgot to mention, I am from Brazil, so we are neighbors.
Okay, nice to know.
So as before, you can raise your hand, type in the chat, or just unmute yourself. Is there a link to your presentation?
Well, I think my explanations added to the presentation, but I wonder maybe ITTN will share the recording with the participants later on?
Yes, so afterwards we will share the record of for the day. So you will have access to all presentations. But if you are interested, maybe in some particular, you can also contact Lakeram. We have Teresa Rodriguez. She raised her hand. Teresa, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the presentation. I'm curious, Lakeram, about how well the device does with it. Well, from the image, it looks a little small, and so I'm wondering how well it does with collecting large amounts of garbage, or how much garbage does that collect, and how frequently do you have to collect or clear the trap. My concern comes from the fact that a few years ago, Jets had done kind of like a homemade type boom, and it was at the mouth of a major gully in our second city, and we were collecting large
Debris.
items. And when I say large items, I mean fridges as well, right? And this was a challenge for the boom. It was a challenge to clear it. And I think we eventually had to abandon it. So I don't know how much experience you have with the large items. I mean, this could also go to, I think, I would love to hear also from the point of view of, I might have missed Chelsea as well. I think it's Chelsea from the University of Toronto, but yeah, so you can go ahead, Lakeram.
All right, so I think I missed a bit because my internet went down a bit, but can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
I can hear you.
Okay, but I think I got the gist. So just to clarify, the bundle installed as yet, and so right now we're still at the stage of getting the producers to finalize the arrangements in terms of the waterway and the size of the device. But I mean, I did do quite a bit of research, and in terms of emptying the trash from the bandlang, of course we'll have to do it, and this is why I mentioned it being very, very participatory and getting more and other groups involved, so we can have a very busy schedule of checking the device and ensuring that it's emptied as often as possible. Based on our visual assessments, we don't have like that large a device. The fridges and so on, we'll probably find like along the coastline, they coming in from the ocean. But in our assessments, we have more small items, mostly plastic bottles, and yeah, various pieces of plastics, but mostly plastics, especially beverage bottles and food containers, based on our visual assessments of the area. And of course, it's always good to start big if you're daring, but I think for us, we're going to start small, see how it works, and see if it can be expanded to other areas, which is the intention actually, which is why I mentioned the ProMar project, because CYN is critically involved in the other project. And in our conversations with ITTN before, we did explore or put forward the option of using that project, started to upscale the trash ITTN initiative to other areas, using larger devices. I think with the boom in Guyana, as I mentioned, because the sediment loads of our waterways are so very high, what I got from the National Drainage Irrigation Authority, who I spoke to, is that these items would pose an issue for us because our coastline is flat and we depend on the waterways to be clear in order to drain water when we have storm surges or heavy downpours. And they are worried about the level of deposition that might take place if we use a boom, and it would decrease the drainage capacity of the waterways. So I think that was the only thing that that was concerning in terms of the boom. So that's why we kind of looked at the bandlang, because it's floating and it's not going to, it's fine sediments and so on could easily pass beneath. It's just the big items at the top.
We have another questions in the chat, Mary Beth, about booms, if you have experience. So I think you answered already. And I would just say about that, we'll have a couple of presentations today that will tackle and we'll discuss types of trash trap devices and what is best for your situation. But he already, Lyrican already said something very important. Doing a visual audit is the first step for you to decide which trash trap will be the most appropriate for your reality. Booms are very effective if you want to capture large items, but if you wants to do something smaller with small items, with more debris, maybe you need to try to find another trash trap device. But we will discuss a lot during this section today, and maybe at the end, if you still have a question, you are more than welcome, and we can discuss with you about that. And we also have a comment here about Houston, that we need additional support for foreign countries for Guyana activities, and we can also discuss that how we can connect and we can work together in the future for the Caribbean area. So those are great questions about the booms, and we encounter here in Toronto, we have a boom. We don't work with that, but ports manage, and they collect only large items like trees and things like that. So they need a clog, they need a boat to collect all the large debris. Do we have another question? We still have 2 minutes. No? So if we don't have more questions, we are going for a break in 2 minutes, and then we'll have a 10 minutes break, and 11:35, from 11:25, 11:35, we'll have a break. Or if you're in Jamaica and other countries, it's 10:35, you will be back. And after our break, we'll have Hannah, who will present and give an overview of the several technologies, exactly what we are looking for and we are discussing right now. And she will talk, her talk will discuss several technologies, their diversity with a similar purpose for drains, beaches, rivers, and other, and their use around the world with a focus on low technology and low cost options. So please go back in 10 minutes and you can hear all about the types of trash trapping device that it is around the world.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end of our break. We've just under a minute. So if people are back, can you just put hi in the chat or maybe give me a wave, and then that way I'll know people are back, and so we can move towards getting started. Thank you, Sarah. Perfect. Looks like we're hitting critical mass. Wonderful. Okay, well then I guess to stay on time, I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. So next up in this workshop is Hannah Frond, coming back to tell us all about the different types of trash trapping technology. So a lot of the questions that have come up, hopefully you'll have a little more insight after Hannah's presentation. So Hannah, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll just share my presentation.
Okay.
Okay. All looks good?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, so as Chelsea mentioned, I'm now going to spend a little bit of time summarizing and going into a bit more detail about the different types of trash trapping technologies that are currently out there and in use around the world, in the hope to kind of make a bit more sense of all the information that's out there, because there is a lot to look at and a lot to dig into. So trash traps, we call them trash traps, but they go by many other names as well. So they can often get called trash capture devices, capture technologies, trash reduction technologies, and so on. But they all work to do a very similar job, and that is to collect anthropogenic waste from our environments. So through the network, we noticed a need for one hub of information on all the devices that are out there. So we've developed a document resource called the Device Directory, and that is included in your resource package that we should have sent to you before the workshop, and you'll receive it afterwards as well. And in this document, we've split the different devices into 7/8 broad categories, which I'll go through today. And these include all that are on the screen right now. So that's stationary skimmers, booms and barriers, storm drain traps, automotives, vacuum devices, stormwater outflow traps, and skimmer vessels as well. So when thinking about what device might be the right one for you in your project, there are a few things to consider. And so first is the location. So where are you going to put it? Is your target location a river channel? Is it a coastal waters? Or is it within an urban stormwater system? And do you want this to be somewhere where people can access it easily, or like Lakeram was mentioning, somewhere that's maybe a little bit more out of the way? Second is your target pollutant. So often the goal, and I think this is the most general reason for getting a trash trap, is to capture as much waste as you can. And there's no specificity about what you're capturing. You just want to get it out the water, which is absolutely fine. But sometimes groups might have a specific pollutant in mind. So for example, they might have a harbour and there's a load of floating microplastics in the waters in the harbour. And so for those kind of situations where you want to target a specific pollutant that appears in a certain area, some devices are better than others at capturing the small stuff. So that's a consideration. Third consideration is cost. So obviously trash traps don't come for free. They cost a bit of money to either purchase or make yourself and maintain. And so the price tag can range from extremely low cost if you decide to do a DIY trap and make one yourself, to they can be on the more expensive end for things such as vessels, skimmer vessels, and trash wheels. Fourth consideration is maintenance. So how often does the trap need to be emptied, or more specifically, how often do you want to empty it, or how often can you empty it, depending on your people power. And so often the difference in maintenance depends on the capacity of the device as well. So the capacity of the device and also how much trash you're collecting. So if you're in an area where you have a certain time of the year where there's really heavy rains, for example, like some of us might have been having recently, how often does your trap need to be emptied in those scenarios compared to the drier times of year? So it can change and it can differ, and that's just something to factor into your decision-making process. And finally, or not finally, fifth is capacity. So some trash traps have collection points that can hold large amounts of waste. So these are great for situations where you want, as I mentioned before, maintenance is less frequent, but this does mean that there is a lot of waste to remove at one time. So this might require more than just keen volunteers with strong arms to come and collect the trash. You might need a crane or some kind of other infrastructure to help lift all of that debris out of the waterway or out of the trap. And so if this is not an option, there are also devices that have smaller catch bags, such as the sea bins, which I'll mention in a minute, that need emptying more often, but often this is a less than 10-minute job to empty the device, whereas for larger devices, it can be a couple of hours. So this is also something to consider. And last but not least is visibility. So do you want your trap to be obvious in a really public area? Do you want it to be an attraction for the community and a focal point? You can use it for outreach and education. Or do you want it to blend into the environment and do its job in a less obvious way so that people know it's there, but they don't know exactly where it is? So this can differ depending on the design of the device. So some devices are really big and bright and can do the former, and some are small and discreet, and then they fit into the less obvious category as well. So we'll go through some of these factors now for each type of device, and just give some examples of how they differ between the different devices that are available. So first up are stationary skimmers. So we use an example of these, which are called sea bins along the Toronto harbour front to collect debris. And these are essentially floating trash cans, and they sit on the surface of the water, and they're often mounted to a dock. And so they collect floating trash on the water surface, including microplastics. We collect a lot of microplastics in these devices. So they range in cost from 6 to 12,000 USD, and that's because they're often there's the size of a trash can, and they need to be emptied daily. And so at the very least weekly as well, depending on the environment and the type of trash and the amount of trash collected, sorry. So the cost ranges depending on the size. So I mentioned some of the size of the trash can, some are a bit bigger, like the collector in the top left. But this can affect the visibility and the capacity. So obviously the larger device can hold more trash, and the smaller devices can be more discreet. So they can be hidden in the harbour front if that's what you wish, but they can also be made more visible, as I mentioned earlier, by using, for example, the ITTN poster that we've developed that you can put nearby to draw attention to it, or you can make something like Inspector Sea Bin that we mentioned from Tobermory to make them a bit more visible, and so people look down and see them in the water. But obviously if you've got one like the collector, which is big and red, it's drawing attention to itself already. So these are great, and we really like these from our experience with them. Second is automotives, and I mentioned these second because they are kind of similar to the skimmers, but they move around. So I like to think of them as little floating robots with mouths, and they eat up all the floating trash. I think that's particularly the case for the waste shark, as you can see on the bottom right photo. I think it looks like a little mouth, like a manta ray. So these are often used in semi-confined waters and along coastlines, because they have to be remotely controlled by the users, and so you need to be able to see them and watch where they're going and direct them towards all the trash. Because they are often remote control, and so there's like an extra technological part to them, they're often on the pricier side in terms of devices. But they are great, and so each time the device is used, you can bring it back to shore and then it's emptied immediately. And because they are quite cool little contraptions, they have very high visibility. So often when you're using them, people will see you with a remote control, or see something moving along the beach, like the B-bot in the top right, and often you'll get people coming up and asking you what you're doing and asking you about the device and how it works. And so these are a really great way to engage people and use them as an opportunity for education about plastic pollution and the issues that you're experiencing locally. So next up we have stormwater drain traps. So these are positioned within urban storm drains, and they capture urban debris that's often washed into these drains during rainfall events. So they often have either a grate or a catch basin, like you can see on the letter trap in the top left, with it that sits within the drain. It's kind of like a basket or a net that sits within the drain, and this is cleared and emptied often on average about 2 to 3 times per year. And because of their relatively simple design, they're one of the cheaper options for trash traps, because they are small and they're relatively simple. Because no storm drain is the same, the manufacturers of these devices have also designed them to be adjustable by size and shape depending on the basin. So this is great because it means that they can adjust it to what you need. And in terms of visibility, because they are often hidden in the ground, they are low visibility traps. So we have recently installed some litter traps in Toronto, and we've added some little signs that can be put on the sidewalk to allow people to identify where they are, and can then take the time to look into what they're doing and how they work if they wish. So they can be low visibility, but in the middle photo there, it's called that device is called a gutter bin, and they obviously chose to have a bright green circle in the middle to make them look a little bit different from your average storm drain. So again, everything is adaptable. There are options if you want it to be high visibility or low visibility. On the theme of stormwater, there are more industrial versions of storm drain traps that we currently call stormwater outflow traps, but some of the examples can be called litter socks and things like that. So they have lots of different names. These are often in line, so within the pipes underground, or they're positioned at the end of the pipe in a stormwater system. And so these tend to capture a lot of trash, a large amount of trash. And because they get quite heavy, as you can probably tell from the picture on the bottom, those nets get really full of quite a lot of debris. So it means removal is not just take one person come and empty them. I think they often require a vacuum truck for debris removal or a crane to lift them out of the water. And so this means that annual costs might be a bit greater for these, because when you consider maintenance and payment for someone to come and remove the debris, that can add to the total annual costs for these devices. Because they are, again, hidden underground, or often if they're at the end of the pipe, that's often in a location where not many people see it. So they have low visibility generally, but they can have a really big impact if you find that a lot of waste is entering the environment and your streams and rivers through these stormwater systems. So they can be really, really effective. Next up, we are on to river traps. So we mentioned these earlier. These are booms and barriers, and they're really great for collecting floating debris along a river channel. So they can be low cost and low technology. And so these are a really great option for a DIY trap if you're just wanting to try something out, see what kind of things you're collecting, learn a bit more about how a trap might be effective in your local area. These are a really great place to start. So they can be low cost because of that. And with their design, because they're essentially form a barrier to stop the passing trash, debris removal can, depending on the design, can stop anything from small debris to larger items. And also the removal of the debris is flexible. And so this can be done regularly or less often, depending on how much litter you're collecting and the ability of that barrier to hold back that trash. So obviously, if you're getting loads and loads of trash and the barrier is really strong, you could leave it to build up for a little while longer. If you've got something a little bit more on the smaller side, such as the top right photo is called a water goat, something that's a little bit less industrial looking, you might need to empty it a bit more often and clear out that trash. But there are many different versions of these devices, and as I just mentioned, some are much larger and more permanent looking, like the blue barriers in the bottom right photo, and others are more simple. So you can have, we've seen options of these that are DIY versions, so buoys with netting around them that are attached to the river banks, or you can also use, we've seen an example last week from Tushka from the Sustainable Seas Trust. They used bottles with netting to also try that, but it really depends on your river channel and how the flow rate of the water and the kind of debris that's in there, whether the simple designs are effective or not, but they definitely can be in the right scenario. On a similar note, but with a bit more to them, we have barriers and booms with a collection point. So these work the same as previously with the booms and barriers. However, these have a central collection point. So Lakeram mentioned this as the trap that they're hopefully going to have in Georgetown in Guyana, the Bandit, which is on the top left. So these have a central point for storage, which means that the trash is collected in a really simple way so that you can collect it easily. It's all in one place rather than being spread across the channel. But because the collection point has a certain capacity, often these need to be emptied weekly is what a lot of the device manufacturers say. But again, it depends on how polluted the waterway is, on the size of the box, and also on whether you've had any heavy rains recently, because as many of us know, and as Sarah mentioned right at the start, if you're having storms or heavy rain, then often the trash will then flow a lot heavier through that water channel. So it really does vary, but I think with these specifically, there's a lot of very similar ones, and they often have different sizes and they're adjustable, as with the other traps. So there's always something out there that seems to fit most scenarios. And because these are great devices, and as Lakeram said, they look really great, so they tend to get a lot of public attention, and you can really take advantage of this. So we'll hear about this again a bit later, but there's an example of a trap called Mr. Trash Wheel on the bottom right, who lives in Baltimore Harbor, who is a trash wheel, so a boom with a conveyor belt in the central area that collects trash. And they in Baltimore decided to put googly eyes on this trap, and it's given him a name and a personality, and it makes people really engage with what's happening there. It's become a real part of the community there. And so you can really take advantage of this kind of thing with these devices and add googly eyes or branding or different colors, whatever you feel. Next, we are on to slightly more industrial types of traps. So these are called vacuum devices, and they can be used on land and along coastlines and often work like a vacuum, or as I would say, a hoover, sucking up litter within their path. So they're often controlled by a human. They take the nozzle and direct it towards all the trash. So that means you can really target certain items and avoid other things or areas where you don't want to be disturbing. But this means that they are limited by the size of the nozzle of the vacuum. So they can't pick up anything larger than that vacuum pipe. So they're mostly suited to kind of macro debris and smaller fragments and microplastics too. But despite their large size, they're actually not as pricey as some of the other devices, and they have a lot of storage. They can collect a lot of trash with each use due to their larger storage bins. And so similarly to the automotives that I spoke about earlier, because these are man-powered and they're large, they're highly visible, and they are pretty interesting to look at. And so I expect that anyone using these will get a lot of spectators watching and asking questions while they're in use and becoming very interested in how they work and what they're doing. And finally, we have skimmer vessels. So these are essentially boats, and they work on waterways to trap trash and bring it ashore. So they range in cost, which is to be expected, similarly to how boats and other vessels range in cost, and their capacity is often as large as the boat hull. So you can see in the photos on the screen that they've got a kind of mouth at the front of the vessel, and that width is often how large the trash they can capture. So they can probably capture fridges, as we mentioned, and other floating debris as well. And because of their large size, they are high visibility, but because they can also work offshore amongst other boats, they might not get noticed as much as other traps. But same with many of the others, you can add things to them. So the example on the top left for Ocean, they have a blue vessel and they've branded it. So when it's moving around in the waterways and collecting debris, people know that it's associated with their organisation. They can assume from that what it's doing and why it's there. So again, very adaptable, but these are on the largest side of the devices available, I'd say. So that was a lot of information, but as I mentioned at the start, we've written it all down in our free resources. So we have our device directory, as I mentioned, which has got all the information about these devices, their cost, the websites to contact the manufacturers, where the distributors are located, if that information is available, and how they function. And we've also got some other resources that we have to help you along the process of planning and deciding what trap might be best for you, because this part of the process is really important to ensure that you've got a successful project later on. So in thinking about the location, Rafaela mentioned this briefly earlier, we've developed a visual audit protocol where you can go into the field and assess your waterways and visually count and categorize the types of debris that you're seeing floating in your waterway in your target location. So if you've got 3 or so locations like Lakeram had, you can go and do a visual audit, which they have done, and compare between the locations. So you can decide on the type of trap from this. Say you're getting loads of large items like tires and things floating in the water, put in the waterways or ending up in there, and then you can adjust accordingly. Or if you're getting loads of bottles, floating bottles and things like that, then you can decide on a trap that might be most appropriate for that. And then to tie these things together, we've also developed a project checklist, which is essentially a sort of step-by-step guide for a successful project, all the way from these really initial first decisions about what trap you're going to use and where you're going to put it, to thinking about how the device might be used and maintained in the long run. So what stakeholders should you involve? Would you like to involve? Who will be maintaining the trap? Who will be purchasing the trap? Who will be doing the waste characterization and data collection, should you choose to do that? Who will be working on sharing that information and educating the local the local public and community. So these are all things to think about, and it just serves as a really, well, we feel it serves as a great step-by-step checklist to make sure that everything is considered at the start. So this should help the project be sustainable into the future. So I think that's it from me, but I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Hannah. So we have a few minutes for questions before we break for lunch, which will be lunchtime for many of us on this call, and maybe breakfast for Hannah and those of you on the West Coast. And if anyone has any questions for Hannah, she probably answered some of the questions from before, but maybe brought up some new questions. Feel free to type the questions in the chat or raise your hand.
Yeah, and I will caveat that I have spent a lot of time looking into these different devices, but I haven't worked with all of them. So I'll try my best to answer questions about them.
Perfect. You have a question from Mary Beth. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yes, hi. I asked the litter boom question before, but it was suggested to me by one of the manufacturers of the litter booms that we use 2 booms. He said one to reduce the, I don't remember what he said, but have you ever heard of that before? I guess I was kind of surprised.
I've
Like
never
2
heard
in
of that
series.
before.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of it before. It does, I might have heard of it once, but I don't think I got a full explanation as to why a group would require 2 booms. I wonder whether it's because they might have if they're 2 different booms potentially. One could
Nope, same booms. He was I know he was saying something about the flow rate and slowing down the trash or something, but that's all I caught.
We've seen litter go over booms before in both directions because of depending on the way the water's flowing right around the mouth of the river. So maybe in a fast flowing river where there's a lot of debris, it would be more effective. But I feel like for the purpose of cost, you could certainly probably start with 1 and see if that is effective and think about whether you would need to, because I would imagine 1 would be effective. But that's interesting. I've also never heard that.
Yeah, I thought it was rather curious. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Any other questions for Hannah before we break for lunch?
Sorry, I realized that I went right to time then, slightly over.
Oh, you're fine.
I got too into talking about the traps.
Okay, it's an important talk of the meeting.
And we'll be sharing, while we're waiting in case anyone has any other questions, we'll be sharing after the workshop the resource package, which will have the device directory in there. And you can contact us anytime if you have any questions about any devices or would like any insight if we have any from working with different groups in the network so far.
Perfect. And I don't see any more questions in the chat, just lots of thank yous and great talk. And I don't see any more hands raised. So I think what we'll go ahead and do is break for lunch. So we will come back in a half an hour. So it'll be either 1:30 or 12:30, depending on where you're at. And then when we come back from break, we'll go into kind of our final session, which is a longer, not our final session, but our final sessions, which are a bit longer, where we sort of dive into the weeds of kind of your trash trapping program and kind of the nuts and bolts of how to do it. And I see Sarah has put on her camera. Sarah, did you want to say something before lunch, or were you just saying hi? Just saying hi. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, feel free to leave your Zoom on. Just turn your camera off and mute, or you feel free to leave and come back, but we'll see you in a half an hour. We'll see you at the bottom of the hour. Again, it'll be either 12:30 or 1:30, depending on where you are. Thanks again, Hannah.
Thank you. Okay, so it's just before, or no, it's just turned to 30 minutes past the hour. So we'll just wait a minute or so for everyone to get back and join us. Please, if you are back, just let us know by saying hi in the chat so that we know everyone's back, and then we can carry on. Hope everyone had a good break. Welcome back, everyone. Just wait one more minute for everyone to settle back in. Hi, Shay. Hello, hello. Okay. As with before, in the interest of keeping things on time, I think we will get going. So next up, we have Rafaela Gutierrez speaking and presenting. She is one of the co-founders of the University of Toronto Trash Team and program lead of social science and educational programs. She oversees the creation and delivery of our waste literacy school programs and is also involved with solutions-based research, such as our trash trapping work in Toronto. And so she's now going to be speaking with us and sharing some of the lessons that we've learned so far with the University of Toronto Trash Team's work with Seabins, and also things to consider for your own trash trapping projects to guarantee success. So I will hand it over to you, Rafaela, now.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen really quickly. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, looks great.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome back. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Recipe for Success section. I'm Rafaela. As Hannah mentioned, I am with the University of Toronto Trash Team and leading our educational program. But I'm also helping with the solutions-based research program where, among other things, we created and tested methodology to collect data from trash trap device. So you want a trash trap? That's why we are all here. To start here, we have outlined a recipe for you all to follow and adjust it based on your tastes and what your kitchen can handle. For those of you who are avid bakers, you know you have to follow the recipe to a T in order for the final product to come out perfect. But here, we're just providing you with some rough guidelines to have a successful trash trapping project and giving you all the opportunity to learn from some of our mistakes and make notes of some of aspects we didn't quite consider before. So what do you need for a trash trapping project? I think before Chelsea and Hannah already explained a little bit, but I will go further in our discussion. So you will need a trash trap device, of course, a body of water to put it in, a team as passionate as you are, funding, big bucket of motivation, and a lot of optimism. Next, throughout the presentation, we'll go through the steps on how to utilize your ingredients for a successful trash trapping project. If you're here today in our workshop, it's mostly likely you know you have a trash problem in your area. You take walks along the lake, coast, or river and see there is trash accumulating everywhere. This very may well be a hotspot and a great place to put a trash capture device, but there is something else to consider prior to just putting it in the first place. The first place you see where garbage ended up. You should access your watershed. That we mentioned that before with the other presentations. This will allow you to gain an understanding of where the litter is coming from, what is the sources are, and what types of plastic waste or litter are you most commonly seeing. You must first identify these to optimize the location for your trash capture device to capture and remove it from your waterways. Depending on your region, the area that you are, there may be multiple sources, whether it's a river or creek, or it may be due to high population density on that water body, in which you will have to emphasize the community outreach aspect in your trash trapping project to encourage behavior change. Within your watersheds, there will be sources, hotspots, transports, and sinks. Source points are always a priority to place a trash capture device, as they will be catch and remove the litter before it further pollutes the watershed. Sites of plastic transport are usually clear pathways or of where plastic moves from one point to another. Rivers are a great example of this. Hotspots are where the trash trains to accumulate at large rates, but it's not its final destination. So if left untouched, it will continue to travel through the watershed after a big storm, for example, or due to a current and winds. Sinks are when it's the end point for litter and where it often gets accumulated and doesn't move locations easily. Each of these possible locations of plastics we just discussed often overlap, and sites of transport can be hotspots, and hotspots could also be sinks. These general definitions that we are just explaining here are just to help you understand the fate of plastic pollution and to understand when placing a trash capture device in a region, tackling any and each of these will still make impact. So don't worry how much impact, you always will make an impact when you were collecting, when you installing trash capture device. You will also need to understand what type of conditions you have in your water body. Is there a lot of aquatic vegetation? We already discussed this at the beginning. Some of in the audience ask about vegetation. What are the wind and water currents like? Taking notes of this season in your region is really important. For example, does your water bottle becomes frozen over? Here in Canada, we work in the season because our water is frozen during the winter. This will help you think about what device may be more feasible for you. Another important question to note is, does your water body have the infrastructure for trash capture device? If so, what type of device can your water body hold? For example, with the UFT trash team, we want to place a Mr. Trash wheel in our harbor, and we already said that. But due to all the construction that's being done near a large source point of litter to our harbor, it was not possible. So we need to change and decide to use different technology. To understand these different sites and conditions in your area, you can try and Google local NGOs in your area to see if they have published a watershed assessment or reported certain outflows of litter from a certain point. Look for a watershed assessment model for your I thought I missed a slide. Look for a watershed assessment model for your region. This may be provided by your local government to help you understand water flow in your watershed and can also help identify potential source points, hotspots, transports, and sinks. Researchers are also working really hard in trying to develop models to predict surface transport of plastic pollution to identify where they are accumulating the most and given the wind and current patterns. But until that is more widely available and we have more information, if there is no open data available to you from local volunteers group or a watershed assessment tool in your area, we have developed an easy method to determine where to place your device and get the most bang for your buck. So as we mentioned before, we have created a visual audit. But what is a visual audit? It's you visually observe the litter present in a water body by recording the types and amount of litter you see in your local water body. You can conduct this a few times throughout the year or season, depend on the area that you're living, to understand how litter accumulates and changes depending on the season or after a rainfall. This will also help you inform on the type of device you should be considering. Should it be mobile or stationary, for example? This protocol can be found on our website and included in your research package given after that we will give you after the workshop. So doing a waste audit, it's an easy way to understand where the leaders accumulate in your area. And this will help you in the future installing and deciding where the locations are. So for example, here in our map, after the visual audit, we located the areas that need the most cleanups. And so we decided to install the trash trap devices near the areas that are accumulated the most litter. Next, you already know your area, you know your watershed, you know your environment. Next, create your dream team. From earlier presentations, we heard from Chelsea, for example, how engaging with multiple different stakeholders can lead to a successful project. So how do you create your own dream team? First, you want to identify your local stakeholders in your area, in your region. This might be a marina, local government, volunteer cleanups groups, NGOs, business along the water, even fishermen, or even other avid waterway users, anyone that is willing and wants to be involved in help clean the water. As there are many economic and social implications with plastic pollution, ensure to sell the benefits of trash capture device as it will help restore the water body to what it was once, and it's a long-term solution. So help them to understand and sell your idea and share them and your excitement how the water body will be in the future if we work together. As you begin to bring together all local stakeholders in this project, make it reach as many people as possible and help it grow. So build a network. In your trash trapping project, ensure everyone feels they have a significant part in this initiative, and you have enough stakeholders motivated to collaborate in this project, as there are many roles to play. So the first role that I want to share here is the operator. You need to know who knows how the device functions, who can fix it when something goes wrong, who has the machinery to remove and deploy the trash capture device if needed be, and who can help access the best points of placement and help identify technical issues. And we will have technical issues. So you need to know who is gonna be that person, who is gonna be this team. Next is who will maintain the trash trap device. Those who maintain it will be cleaning it out daily, or however often the debris needs to be removed and maintained, and ensure everything is functioning properly. Next is after knowing who will maintain your device, you need your waste characterization team, who will collect the daily data using our simple data protocol, or who will collect the data using our detailed protocols, which requires quantification and characterization of the litter 5 to 10 times a season or a year. Who will comply with the data to send it to the trash trapping network. And lastly, identify who will work on communicating the project to your local community and organize outreach events or other opportunities around the device. Who will help create signage or tell the story to your local community about this project. So all these roles, they are fundamental to have a successful trash trapping project. Once you complete your watershed assessment and create your dream team, pick the device together. What seems to be the best device for you, for your team? Think about the environment you are in. Do you get snow or ice? For example, we do here. Do you have a drought? What type of aquatic organic material is present in your area? What the weather likes in your area? These are important considerations for the maintenance and storage of your device. For example, because we have a winter, we have to remove the technology from the water during the winter. So you need to considering that if you need to remove, who it's going to remove and how. Once you pick the device you think is best, and you have an idea of where you want to place the device in your area, do you have the capacity to operate it? Does it need an external energy source, for example? Can you provide this? Do you have a reliable form of labor to maintain the device over time? Based on the capability of your team, would you benefit more from a manual or autonomous device? The device with larger holding capacity require less frequent collection, whereas smaller devices require more attention, and collections depend on how polluted the area is, of course, always. It's important to remember the fit for purpose statement. We want to emphasize here that having a trash trap device, no matter the size, will still make a measurable difference. Now, you have your team and ideal device. It's time to think about funding. What can you and your team afford? Many of the cheaper devices are valued around $1,000 to $10,000, but this does not include maintenance or operational costs. Does someone in the team that have a machinery, if required, to deploy and retrieve the trash trap device? Put your heads together to try and identify funding sources and plan for long-term maintenance. And I think this is really fundamental when we are talking about the trash trapping device, is you need to think about long-term maintenance because it will require funding for that. If there is little to no funding, but volunteers are available, you and your team could consider manual debris collection efforts and use a low-cost device. Some of Hannah presented before. Example of this, she already include booms, litter traps, or even do-yourself trash trap device. So in this situation, get creative. It's possible to do with less money for acquire a new technology or create your own. Lastly, ensure you utilize your device to the fullest extent. It's important to recognize that this is not only a technology that removes litter, but it can also be used as a research tool and act as a centerpiece for education and outreach to engage with your local community in a collaborative initiative. By engaging with the public, you can bring awareness to solutions that individuals can have starting at home and educate them on the common sources and types of plastic that litter our waterways. Studies have shown that when outreach is partnered with innovations in waste management, the plastic waste reduction is increased more versus when it's just innovation with no outreach. So we already have some examples and we will discuss this and how outreach is really important to engage with public. And one of the things that we are also doing, we use this, all the content, all the litter device that we have here. We also share in the schools with grade 5 students, which is very exciting for them and excited for us. So bring the community together and try to share as much as you can. So to finalize, this recipe has been created from many different attempts, and it's still going on and it still needs to tweaks and adjusting throughout the years as we discover new ingredients needed to make this as successful as possible with your help. So we are still learning. Every year we learn something new and we include something in our recipe that makes our project unique and a successful one. So, but so far, some of the things we realized we needed to add and think about it, we want to share with you right now. So one of the things that we learned is maintaining roles and responsibilities. This is really, really key. We learn extremely important that everyone have their set roles and take responsibility for what they are assigned, or else the project is not as effective as intended. Make sure you maintain relationship with your team so that everyone is held accountable for their part. Establishing these roles will make the process much smoother in the end. Next is identifying and recognize your native vegetation. We found that vegetation can damage our trash capture device easily if left unmaintained for a long period of time, and due to some local vegetation like pine tree, for example, as their needles were small enough to breach the mesh, causing damage to the pump. So what we had to do was placing the device far from these trees would just help avoid this issue. Lastly, we found in the fall, we had some dead fish accumulated in the bins. If this occurs, keep an eye in the area. We realized it was unlikely our device caused this, as the fish can swim out the current that the pump creates, and it was most likely due to poor water quality. But if this may occur in your area, you need to make sure that you are paying attention. So this may not be the case for your device, so it's important to note if this occurs more than once, you may consider moving your device to another area to avoid an impact to aquatic organisms, because this is totally the opposite that we want to happen. So make sure that you are paying attention what you are collecting, and if you are collecting many wildlife, that's probably not a good sign, and you need to move your device to another location. So those are the things that we learn during our process, and I think we are open for questions if you want to. If you have any question for me, I'm open. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafaela. That was great. So I'm sure that we have a few minutes now before we go for our next quick break, before we head into our final round of presentations. So we will hold on for a couple of minutes in case anyone has any questions. So you can raise your hand or type in the chat. Oh, Lakeram has a question. So Lakeram, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Hannah and Rafaela. Very good presentation. I was really drawn to the part that where you spoke about watersheds. And that's pretty important, I think, for the islands in the Caribbean, especially get a lot of watersheds in those areas, a lot of river valleys. And can you hear me? I think my internet is a bit unstable.
Yeah, you dropped out for a second, but you're back now, so you can continue.
All right, so yeah, I was just mentioning the part about watersheds is extremely important and unique to the islands because of the many watersheds that they have. Because of the mountainous terrain, you have a lot of river valleys and so on, which might not always lend themselves to streams, but in the wet season, they're almost always filled with water, and you have a lot of communities that reside along these rivers. And so, you know, that's a good, I didn't think about that actually before, but I'm glad it was mentioned, because that's really important when you're dealing with these small island developing states in terms of terrain and site placement of these devices. So that's pretty good. So thanks for that.
No problem. Yes, we realize that's really important to take in consideration the environment you are, the types of watersheds, the types of water body that you have in your area, and how the seasons work. If you have a drought, if you have ice, here we deal with cold. So what's the best solution for us in a cold area? For you, I don't know, maybe when you have a lot of rain or a lot of drought. So we need to considering all this situations when you are choosing your trash trapping device.
Definitely. We have a question in the chat from Leslie. So they say, good afternoon. We were wondering if you have any solutions for debris that sinks to the seafloor. I can have a go answering that one. So I actually didn't include them in my previous presentation about the different devices, but there are a couple of devices that exist out there. One is called the bubble barrier. And so it kind of sits along. I think the reason I didn't include them is because there's two devices that I know of, and they're both in quite early stages of rollout. So the bubble barrier, I believe, is based in the Netherlands. Can check that afterwards. But they have it in a river, so that it's kind of a big tube that sits on the riverbed, and it has a strong flow of bubbles. It creates a sort of a bubble barrier, as it's named, and that allows anything that's sunk to the riverbed to float to the surface, and then it can be collected at the river banks in a certain collection area. Or it can be also, a good thing about those devices, they can be used in coastal waters, and they can be paired up with other devices. So say if you really wanted to go for it, you could have a bubble barrier and then a sort of automotive device that collects everything that goes to the surface if you're going to go really fancy with it. Or a boom. So same thing, yeah, in a river you could have a boom that combines with it. So they do exist, but I think they're still in kind of the early stages of rollout. So as far as I know, the bubble barrier is still only has one device installed, but they're planning to have a few more around Europe over the next year or so. But they're probably the main device that exists for that. I hope there will be more in the future, actually, because there's definitely a focus on floating trash, but not so much on what's on the seafloor or the riverbed.
Great.
No problem. Any other questions before we have a quick 10-minute break? Okay, so Dion's got a question. So hi, should a hydrologist be included with the team to determine the type of trash trap?
We didn't have one. So that's why our visual audit was very important. But we also had another project that we released some GPS bottle. We put some GPS inside the bottles, and we throw those in the water in our harbor front, and we want to see how so this would imitate a plastic debris, and we want to see how this would move or not move in our waterfront. So then we have a student, PhD student, who understands about the hydrology, so she could create a model to see how plastic is accumulating in our harbor front. But that was, these data help us with the data, with our audit, our visual audit, to make sure that we are collecting and we are installing the traps in the right location. But I think depend where you are. A visual audit, it's really inexpensive, and it's really bring a lot of good data.
Great, thank you, Rafa.
No problem.
Yeah, Chelsea's added to that. So she's mentioned that when we were exploring river traps, we did have to seek advice from hydrologists, our local conservation authority on the flow of the river generally, and at peak flood. But as Rafa said, we didn't hire one or work directly with one.
Yes, but it's true. We had some advice.
Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, so we are at the hour. So we're just going to have one final quick break, and the reason is because the next session has a few presentations in it. So we wanted to give everyone one last little break before we head into the final round of the workshop. So everyone can have a quick 10-minute break and we'll come back at 10 past. And when we come back, we have our session called The Ingredients. So it's all the details of things you might want to consider when you start a trash trapping project. So we'll have members of our team from Ocean Conservancy and Lakeram joining us. We'll be talking about outreach and communication, data collection and research, and then also trash trap ownership and operation. So we will see everyone back here in about 9 minutes time. Thank you again, Rafa.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Okay, so it's about that time. We have about 1 minute left. If you're here, go ahead and type a hi in the chat so we know people are back from break. I think Hannah started recording, so we'll go ahead and start in just a minute. Thanks, everyone. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have reached our final session, but our final session is essentially 3 rounds of talks, which is meant to sort of go into a deep dive of basically the actual ingredients that sort of make up a trash trapping program, which include outreach, the actual ownership and operation, as well as data collection. So I'll walk through what this session will be, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So there's going to be 3 sessions. We're all going to stay in this room together. And for the first half an hour, we're going to hear from Robyn Stegman and Maddie Black from Ocean Conservancy, who are both going to talk about outreach and communication. Maddie's an expert in digital communication and media. And Robyn Stegman is also an expert of digital campaign. And she has a fun background, which she used to run the Mr. Trashville Twitter handle. So some of what she's going to tell us is all about that experience. And so we're going to turn it over to them in just a second. Once they are done, we're going to turn it over to Sarah Kollar, Rafaela Gutierrez, and Britta Baechler. Sarah and Britta are from Ocean Conservancy. Rafaela, who you've met, is from the U of T trash team. They're going to talk about data collection and research. So they're going to talk about why you collect data, how we collect data, and how that data is shared globally, as well as how it informs our impact. And then finally, at the very end, we're going to talk about ownership and operation. So that's where you're going to have myself, Hannah again, as well as Lakeram again. So you've seen all of us before. We're going to talk about what it means to actually own a trap and operate a trap, which includes some of the nitty gritty about like how you plug it in, how you empty it, what happens when it breaks, that type of thing. And then from there, we will go ahead and hand it back to Hannah. We'll do a bit of question and answer, and then we'll wrap up the day. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Either Robyn or Maddie, you should have control and be able to share your screen. Maybe make sure that you can.
Yeah, give me just 1 second. Just starting the slideshow.
Perfect.
All right. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, great. All right. Nope, go back. All right. As Chelsea introduced, I'm Robyn Stegman. I'm here with my colleague Maddie, and we jokingly call this slide "Why you should put googly eyes on your trash trap." As Chelsea noted, I used to work with Mr. Trashwheel. We were really fortunate that when we first had the trash wheel installed, we posted a video of the trash wheel eating trash during a rainstorm, which, as some of you know, or some of you will soon to find out, when you get the largest volume of debris coming down that river, that ended up going viral on YouTube, getting 1 million hits. And so then the folks who ran the trash wheel were looking to find like ways to capture more people from that viral video, and they hired a bunch of teams. One of them was mine, who suggested putting googly eyes on it and starting a Twitter account as a personified device, and we'll talk a little bit about the success with that. But really, this isn't just about like one way for you to communicate about your trash trap, but more about the principles that drove that campaign and all the campaigns that we do at Ocean Conservancy that you can then take and apply to however you want to promote your trash wheel to the community. And I'll pass it over to Maddie.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robyn. As Robyn said, you know, this presentation is about the ingredients that go into your trash trap, and communicating about it is one of those critical ingredients. So before we get into that, I'll just give a little bit more background. Robyn spoke about her experience with Mr. Trash Wheel. I'll speak a little bit about who we are in terms of Ocean Conservancy. As you heard earlier, Ocean Conservancy is a US-based advocacy organization with 50 years experience tackling the ocean's greatest global challenges. We have a dedicated brand communications and digital team with about 15 full-time staff. Robyn sits on Ocean Conservancy's digital team, which covers all forms of digital and new media. So that's social media, websites, text alerts, email, etc. I sit on the communications team, which covers more traditional media, which I will get into more later. But specifically, both of us work with the trash team and the International Coastal Cleanup. And the International Coastal Cleanup is the world's largest beach and waterway cleanup effort. Since 1986, ICC has mobilized over 17 million volunteers to collect over 350 million pounds of trash from beaches and waterways, all the while collecting data on each item. And we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of data in communicating in a bit. And then, as you know, along with the U of T trash team, we helped found the ITTN as a way to scale up the impact of the ICC by connecting groups all over the world doing trash trapping work. So as part of that, we want to help be able to scale up communications around trash trappers and help show the public their potential, create more local engagement and awareness of the trash problem, and just engage people on a community level. So with that, I will turn it back over to Robyn, who will speak more about her experience on that front.
Yeah, so the first question I usually get asked in general when people are looking to build trash traps and I'm talking to them about communication is like, why now? Why run a communication campaign around the trash trap? Isn't enough just to build it, grab the trash and have the machine work towards its intended purposes? A big reason is that trash traps, because they're so new, and when you put them into the community, you're going to have some curiosity, and being able to unlock that curiosity and to create a campaign, a network of people around your trash wheel is really important because it helps you do a couple of things. One, it is great for fundraising when you are able to have a bunch of people who are interested and fascinated in what you do, both for going to other funders and from people who are interested. Like, with the trash wheel, we sold everything from like t-shirts and did big events. And so you have a large group of people now who are surrounded. It also makes a great media hook because there are a lot of people engaged. The media is more likely to report on it. And important, at least for me, in a lot of my work, is around how do we actually change behavior. And what we found with personifying our trash wheel and doing a campaign around trash wheel, this is something University of Toronto does really well as well, is by using these findings from these trash traps, you're actually able to get people to rethink how they're using plastic pieces or other pieces that potentially can end up into rivers in their home, how their communities are addressing this issue, and they're more likely to advocate and to change their behavior. And lastly, like there are a growing number of trash traps in the world, but there aren't many. And so being able to use these communication tools, like in our trash wheel point, we are now known all over the world. This small thing that we put up in Baltimore was able to have a huge reach. And that was because we were able to be really creative and intentional about the way we communicated about the trash trap. So let's talk about how you did that. Before we get that, I'll just give you a couple of examples of from the trash wheel. When I say international icon, what I mean. So this is just a collection of different artwork, tattoos, beer, costumes, all sorts of things that were all generated by our community. We didn't make any of this. This was all people who just became fans of the trash reel and fans of the mission. And the thing is that oftentimes the people in your community, like, they are also invested in having cleaner rivers and having a cleaner ocean and having cleaner communities. So building a communication campaign that helps them connect those desires to your trash device automatically builds this huge groundswell of support for your device and for your organization. So when we are creating a communication campaign, the first thing I always ask people is, who is their audience? Good communication is as much about listening as it is about speaking. And that listening part really has to happen first in order to create a really great communication campaign. So one way that you can really do that listening is figuring out, where does your audience live? And that means both online and in person. So you know, are they on TikTok more? Are they listening to the radio? What events are they going to? And also, what content are they looking and liking and subscribing and engaging with right now? So that means, like, in the case of Mr. Trash Reel, like, we connected a lot of times with things that people were already talking about. In this case, this is a picture of Dolly Parton, who's an American singer, and like, we put the trash reel literally in that story because we knew people were already talking about Dolly Parton. So it was an opportunity for us to go into people's feeds who were already talking about those things and bring a little trash reel message. Or another great example is that at Ocean Conservancy, a lot of our blogs are focused on ocean animals. Obviously, we're an ocean conservation organization, but it serves another purpose, which is, we know people are curious about the ocean. They're searching for things like the Dumbo octopus. And we want, when they're searching for what is a Dumbo octopus, why is a Dumbo octopus so cute, when they're searching for that information, that they land on our site, they're getting the information that they want about the Dumbo octopus, but also for us, it gives us an opportunity to not only educate them about the ocean, but to give them our conservation message, to say, hey, we also care about the ocean. Will you work with us? Will you take action with us? Will you become a member with us? And so by being able to go meet the audience in their Google search terms, we're able to reach a much wider audience than people who are specifically looking for specifically Ocean Conservancy as an organization. So this could look a lot of different ways for you. I've seen really cool campaigns where people have done videos, where people have done even songs, where people have done dances, you know, whatever you see your community engaging in and sharing with, like, it's a great entryway to think about how you can use that to communicate about your trash trap device and your work that you're doing. The next principle is making it personal. So, you know, one of the biggest things we did with the trash trap is really test during those early days through our tweets and through all of our communication, our voice, to create a really human style voice and something that felt very much of the community that we were talking to. So in this case, in Baltimore. And so one way we did that was talking about Baltimore events like sporting matches or things that were happening in our community. Another way that you can do that is by bringing the community in and listening, again, by encouraging interactivity. So one example that we do on Ocean Conservancy is we have a text messaging service, and instead of just constantly bombarding people's phones with things that we want them to do, we'll oftentimes have opportunities for them to text back. So in this case, we did a text where people could text their responses to questions like, do you like the hot or the cold? And after they responded to these messages, we gave them a personalized message with what ocean animal was their inner ocean animal. And we still gave them some sort of take action, some sort of way that they could get involved with us. But we personalized it by making it be something that they kind of crafted together by them, like telling us their likes. We could give them something really personal to them. around how they could help the ocean. Very easy ways to do this are just asking questions, putting up polls. Those kind of interactivities can really help. And in particularly trash traps, one of the things we did with the trash wheel is we did dumpster dives. This was what we used to figure out a sample size of what our trash wheels were collecting. So, about how many plastic bottles, about how many plastic bags, and we got people to come in, our community members to come in and dive into a dumpster with us and actually hand sort all the trash. And people got really excited about it because when we were talking about the numbers of how many plastic bags Mr. Trash Wheel collected, or we were talking about the impact, people felt like they were a part of this. They had given their day, but also what they got out of it was this feeling like I'm helping that trash wheel make that impact. And so one of the key reasons why it's really important to make this personal is a big thing what you're doing with communication is making people feel like they are invested in the impact of that trash trap and how that trash trap is affecting and changing their community. And then finally, I will say one of the biggest things I always encourage people is to get creative. This was one thing that we did in Baltimore, which was called the Order of the Wheel. It was a secret club that we created that the only way people could join was to do 5 different actions to clean up their local community and learn about their waterways. And if they did those 5 actions, they were invited at a specific place and time to a joining, like a event basically to induct them and to join them into the group that included like a secret handshake and a whole performance. It was like a 30-minute performance just for those people. And because we could have just said, hey, here's 5 things that you could do for the planet. Do those things today. And we would get some response. We've done that before, but this particular campaign that we did got an overwhelming response. We got so many people who did so many actions because what we offered them was something different than what other environmental organizations were doing. And again, we had that sense of community that by doing these 5 actions, not only am I helping the planet, but I'm also get the opportunity to be closer to this organization that I love and be closer to other people who are super passionate about the environment. And so thinking about ways that you can get creative and weird always pays off, but especially when those creative and weird ways offer people the opportunity to feel closer and feel more impactful in what they do. So I always say that yes, it's important to meet your audience and make it personal, but there is this X factor there that's with creativity. And so really either within yourself, encouraging your organization to think out of the box, or even engaging people in your community who are artists or song makers or storytellers, and bringing them in to bring that creative spark into your communication campaign. And then I'm going to pass it over to Maddie to a really important thing to do, especially the trash trap, which is using your data.
Yes, and thank you, Robyn. I will never tire of hearing about all of the super fun ways that people have engaged with the icon, the legend, Mr. Trash Wheel, and his expanding family. Yeah, so using your data, this is hugely important, and our partners or colleagues are going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit. Using your data, this is certainly true for Mr. Trash Wheel. I'll be speaking a little bit more about some examples with the International Coastal Cleanup. We often say that the thing that sets the ICC apart from other cleanup efforts is data, the focus on data. And we found over the course of, 37 plus years that it's one of the most useful public awareness tools we have. So data can help inform a campaign focus. ICC data has led to Ocean Conservancy calls to action on items like cutlery, straws, food wrappers, cigarette butts, all these things that are consistently in the top 10 most commonly found items on beaches and waterways. To that end, it also fuels advocacy. If you successfully campaign to have an item like straws banned, for example, and it gets to a level where you know, a local government or state government is considering it, lawmakers want to have numbers to back up their actions. And we've seen ICC data being used to support countless state, local, national legislation on plastic items. It activates your audience, going back to that, you know, dumpster dive idea that Robyn talked about. The data helps make people feel invested in the trash trap, in what they're doing, and it carries over into their everyday life. You know, when you're on a beach collecting and counting every single, you know, cigarette butt you find, or if you're at a trash wheel pulling out every single cigarette butt you find, you start to think about cigarette butts differently. And it also can just be a, you know, good data point for people to have and learn about that type of plastic pollution. A lot of people don't know that cigarette butts are plastic pollution, and having the data to back it up can be a really powerful tool. And finally, it can be an interesting news hook. People love numbers, and journalists in particular love numbers. And data can be a great way into talking about your trash trapping work to the media in general. So one example that's sort of highlighted on this page from the ICC, in 2019, ICC data showed that for the first time ever, food wrappers were the #1 item collected globally instead of cigarette butts. And because this was a change from the last, you know, 30 plus years of data that preceded it, we were able to use this as an entry point into pitching media about the international coastal cleanup generally. So we were able to talk about, you know, changing trends in plastic pollution and talk about cleanups in general. We also built out several digital calls to action around food wrappers, and not a full campaign, but we did build out sort of a mini campaign around that. So next slide. On that note, I want to talk a little bit more about how you can connect with traditional media. So, Robyn, can we go to the next slide?
Oh, yes, sorry.
No, you're good. So when we talk about traditional media, what I'm talking about is, you know, broadcast TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, the online news versions of those outlets. So connecting with traditional media really means connecting with the gatekeepers of media. You know, unlike digital channels where you can kind of connect with your audience directly, when you're trying to get into the news, you're really trying to connect with producers, bookers, editors, journalists, and you're essentially pitching them on your story. It can also be a little bit more direct in the form of op-eds or letters to the editor, which are very widely read in a great way to get your story out there, but you still have to get through the editor to get your news on the front page. So how do you tailor your message to this audience? In addition to many of the areas that Robyn kind of already covered, you know, getting personal, getting creative, obviously using your data, there are a few tips that we tend to follow when communicating with media. So the first thing is to make it as timely as possible. Journalists always want something new or flashy. So, you know, thinking about trash traps, is this the first trash trap in your area, perhaps? You know, is there maybe local legislation about plastic that where your trap is located that you could connect to? Does your trap use new or interesting technologies? You know, just be on the lookout of things like that that you could potentially take advantage of to tell your story to media. The second is make it impactful. So does the story move the needle in a meaningful way? Does it stir emotion or tell, you know, a personal story? So one of the best ways to communicate impact is through photos and video, basically, and just making sure that you're capturing those and providing them to journalists, because we really always want to be showing and not telling whenever we can. Even just iPhone quality can be totally helpful. I know personally, I've sent, you know, video clips to journalists that have made it onto local news just from my iPhone. So, you know, it doesn't have to be crazy, but just making sure that you're capturing those photos and video along the way is hugely important. And finally, make it specific. This goes back to just knowing your audience. In the case of journalists and media, you need to make sure that your story appeals to them. Trash traps are generally a pretty local story. So getting to know your local journalists, getting to know your local media outlets, and finding out what sort of stories they're covering is critical to pitching trash traps. And as you can see from these couple of examples, one is from U of T. They covered the data in CTV News. Another is from an outlet called New Atlas, which has a very like tech-focused, it's a very tech-focused outlet, and we pitched them about a partner's work in Vietnam putting in a trash trap. So that sort of goes back to the idea of knowing your audience. And then finally, just be prepared for questions. I think this is true not just for, you know, communicating with journalists, but communicating for the public writ large. People are going to have questions about trash traps, and just having some FAQs prepped for your area is helpful. I would say the top 3 from my experience, limited experience, Robyn can probably add some more, but you know, what steps are you taking to make sure that traps don't interact with animal life? What do you do with the waste that's collected? And then, you know, is cleaning up trash really all that important? Should we focus on other solutions? And finally, next slide. We want to help tell your story when we can. ITTN does not have a dedicated social media page at the moment. However, we do post on the University of Toronto Trash Team's channels, as well as Ocean Conservancy's channels. And we want to help amplify your stories from the ITTN network. So these are some ways you can get in touch with us. You can email info@trashtrap.org, use our hashtag, join our Facebook group. It's not a public Facebook group, but if you post, you know, the latest of what's going on there, it will find us eventually, and we can figure out how to best help you amplify it. So that's about it for me. Robyn, do you have any final thoughts to add?
I don't think so. I will say one thing that I forgot to add after our last workshop is just a reminder when Maddie was saying about being prepared for asking questions, another piece just to remember to have some sort of monitoring or response to what happens if something happens with your trash trap. Like, because your trash trap is a physical thing, and oftentimes it's in your community where people are walking by it every once in a while. I'll say an example of the trash wheel is we had a bunch of baby ducks that had nested safely in the dumpster and had decided that they wanted to play with the conveyor belt in the trash wheel as like a fun little summertime activity, but people walking by thought the trash wheel was eating the little ducklings. And so we had to have somebody on staff there to go out to take pictures. We had to be able to respond to that and do it really quickly before too many people had tweeted about like our trash device potentially like killing small ducklings. So those things happen really rapidly. We had a kayaker who got trapped in our trash device during a storm, like crazy. We've had a python wrap itself around the battery pack. Like, these things happen because you're in a marine environment. And depending on where your trash trap is, just account for the fact that people might be seeing that, and you need to make sure that you have a plan with your team. If something like that happens, who's going to respond? Who's going to get that phone call at 12 o'clock at night if something happens, so that you guys are prepared to talk about that before other people tell that story and might not have the same messaging that you do. Great, that's all I got.
Yeah,
Thank you, Robyn and Maddie. Does anyone have questions? We have some time before we go into the next 30-minute talk, which will be on data collection and research. But if anyone has any questions about outreach and communication for Maddie or Robyn, this is a great time to ask. Again, you can raise your hand, or you can go ahead and type them in the chat. So far, I don't see any questions. And we'll also have some more time for questions when we get to the end of the 3. So although I think Robyn, you're going to be out of here. So if you have any questions for Robyn, you want to ask them now. I could have Robyn come teach me all about outreach and communication for 4 hours. That'd be wonderful. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. So I think we'll go ahead and we'll switch to the next session. So thank you, Maddie and Robyn. And Britta, I don't know which one of you are sharing your screen, but we're going to turn it over to Britta, Sarah, and Rafaela.
All right, thank you so much, Maddie and Robyn. I'm going to start sharing my screen, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Britta, you're a little quiet.
I will project. Is that a little better, Chelsea? My computer gets angry. Hannah, can you add my capability to screen share, please? Ah, got it. Okay, let me pull my presentation up. Is the audio okay? I'll try to yell.
I think if I just turn you up, I can hear okay. So for others, maybe just turn your volume up for Britta, just as a little bit, again, like you're underwater.
I'm just calling in from underwater, guys. Sorry about that. My video just went. Awesome. Well, I'm here. I'm going to start presenting. One moment. Maybe my video will come back on. Sorry about that. All right. Well, let's get started regardless. Thank you for turning up the volume. This is Britta Baechler here with Ocean Conservancy. I'm here. I'll be the first of 3 presenters in our session about data collection and research. So again, Britta Baechler, I work for Ocean Conservancy. My job is to work on all things science and research related to our plastics program. So I'm really fortunate in that I get to work with different programs within Ocean Conservancy, like our International Coastal Cleanup and Global Ghost Gear Initiative, and also with this wonderful network, the ITTN. I have 2 incredible colleagues joining me in this session today, Rafaela, who you've heard from, and Kollar, who you will hear from. We're really pleased to be here today talking about the importance of data collection, and we will talk you through how to do it using our existing protocols. In this session today, we will touch on why and how collecting harmonized data are paramount and how we can use the protocols and applications we currently have to collect these important data. So trash capture devices serve not only to collect debris, but also to collect data. These data can be used for scientific purposes to support evidence-based research, which is wonderful. They can also, and actually have been used, as Maddie was mentioning, to inform policies and create really important preventive regulations. Last, these data can be used for education and outreach, raising awareness in local communities, and even at the state and national and international levels. These data can be used to inspire imagination and to push for solutions to the really unfortunate plastic pollution problem in communities around the world. So we've learned today about trash capture devices, but we'll talk in this session about how these devices are actually really important scientific tools. Trash capture devices collect debris in a standardized way. They can be used to quantify and characterize the actual amount in terms of weight and categories in terms of item types of the different anthropogenic debris that are captured and ultimately diverted from the environment. We can also learn more about not only what's captured in the devices, but also about how effective those devices are for capturing different sizes of debris, from the very small microplastics with some types of devices, all the way to those really large pieces, bottles, tires, etc. So this makes them really powerful scientific tools to understand and estimate sources of contamination at different scales. The University of Toronto team has really extensively researched the trash trapping devices they've used in the Toronto Harbor. That's to ensure that subsampling of what's collected in those traps is a reliable way to estimate total catch weight and total count of the debris items in those traps. Because some of these traps can capture thousands and thousands of different pieces of trash per haul, subsampling via the protocols we'll talk about today can be an effective way to save time while still accurately collecting data on what debris have been captured. And Rafa will talk more about that in detail in a moment. One really great thing about this trash trap network we've started and that you're learning about today is that everyone involved is working to collect harmonized data. So using the same protocol is the goal, so that we're all collecting data in the same way. The more we learn about all the different trash trapping devices out there and how our protocols may or may not work well with those devices, the more we can improve those protocols and sort of better our ability to extrapolate the results we get in each of our devices. Having accurate estimates of what trash we capture is really critical because it is the bridge to connect science with policy and science to education. As Maddie already touched on today, plastic pollution reduction policies have been on the agendas of many governments in recent years, which is wonderful. For example, in the United States, where I'm calling in from, certain individual states and even counties and individual cities have passed legislation limiting the scale and distribution of certain single-use plastic items like those you see on the screen here. In Canada, where Rafaela and Chelsea and our other University of Toronto colleagues currently are, the government announced a ban on multiple types of single-use plastics effective last year. Decision makers do want to be sure that the policies they're creating are backed by robust data and numbers, as Maddie mentioned. So as such, for many of these policies, cleanup data are key to informing those decisions. And the ITTN will provide yet another strong data set from which those policies may be born. The last topic I'm going to touch on is the communication value of trash trapping devices and of the ITTN. Data collected from the trash trapping devices that we have in our network can be incorporated to engage with the public through all kinds of different channels, from social media, which can have a global reach, to infographics generated from your device's data, which can also have a broad reach or a more narrow one if you prefer. And then there's educational programming, for which the ITTN now has some really valuable resources. We're working to develop more that you'll be free to use and adapt to your area. So on this slide are just a few examples of how the U of T trash team have used trash trapping devices for communication purposes. And really quickly, I'll highlight the picture on the left, which is an image that went viral on Twitter. And Rafaela, who you'll hear from in just a moment, was in the field doing a waste characterization from one of their trash trapping devices when she came across this blob, which is actually a degraded coffee cup. And the photo is fantastic because it confirms that there's a plastic liner inside of the coffee cup, which was actually news to many people, including myself, until recently. So this image really opened up important dialogue on social media about the topic of plastics, about recyclability of different products, etc. So last thing I'll say is that these data we collect through different devices can be displayed in a lot of different formats, can engage the public in different ways. And our trash trapping devices and our data have many benefits. We're out quantitatively measuring our impact, but we're also communicating that impact in a lot of different ways. So lots of power in the data you're collecting. And at this point, I think I will stop sharing and pass the mic over to Rafaela.
Mute. Sorry. Okay, thanks. Great, thanks, Britta. So now that you all have an understanding of why it's so important to use your device for data collection, let's go through and see how to do it. We talk so many times, oh, our protocol. Let's discuss about our protocol right now. Okay, first off, there are two protocols that we have created to collect the data. The first is the simple data protocol, which ideally would be carried out by those who maintain your trash trap device, as this is meant to be carried out at least once a day. And of course, depending on the technology. It is intended for devices that need to be emptied out daily or very often. As Britta mentioned before, This data will be used to extrapolate it and determine how much plastic we collected versus the rest of the natural debris or other contents collected by your trash capture device. For this protocol, all you need is a PPE gear and a scale and our data trapper app, which I will go through in a second. The second protocol is our detailed data protocol. This is intended for your design and waste characterization partner, who will go and do a deep dive into the debris and quantify and characterize the different litter caught in your trap. Here you do not use the data trap app, but instead you use paper data sheet, which I will show you in a few slides. So let's start with the simple data, simple protocol. So you simply, as you can see in the picture, you simply remove the debris from your trash capture device and weight the contents using a luggage scale. You can then record this weight into the data trapper and then throw away your debris into the garbage. This should take no more, we say 10 minutes, but actually I think this is a 5 minutes job and depend on your device. So just collecting your weight and input some information in the data in the app. So the data trapper is an app developed by UFT Trash team, and you can download it from Apple Store or Google Play. And after you install in your device, you can record your data. It's free, and you can use as many times as you want. And it's a good way to share your data within the network. And I will share very quickly here the video with the tutorial. This video is not the most up-to-date. We changed a little bit the words, but the main idea it's here. So let me just play. And can you give a thumbs up if you can hear the video? Britta or Sarah?
Here we are just showing you how to use the app. First, type in your name, the city where you were located, and under site, pick which marina you are within that city. And if your marina has more than one seabin, they will all be listed under seabin ID, and you can pick the one you are currently weighing and emptying. When you open the app, the date and time the bin's being removed is automatically inputted. So all you have to fill out is approximately how long your trap has been collecting litter since it was last emptied. Next, fill out whether it has rained in the past 24 hours, what the current wind and weather conditions are. Then, you'll take a photo of the seabin contents, meaning you'll just take a top view photo of the contents within the catch bag. If you are happy with the photo, press Use Photo, and then you'll have a preview of the photo that you'll be submitting. Next, you'll input the final weight of the seabin indicated on your trash scale. And lastly, you'll fill in how full your seabin was, a quarter full, half full, or full to the brim. And if there was anything particular you wanted to note down about the seabin, simply type it in the notes and you're ready to submit.
That's it. So we understand we use the terminology specific to the seabin. We change a little bit, but this is intended to be utilized by any device that is emptied daily. So our first device was a seabin, but now we are testing in different trash trap device. Now move on to the detail protocol. You will need a few more materials than the simple data protocol, and a few of each you will have to create, construct, build yourself, which I have highlighted here in the red arrows that mean that basically are the sieves that you needed to use. But we have ensured all of those materials can be easily found at your local hardware store or Amazon or an online store. So they are very simple materials. And all of these materials is listed in the resource package that you will receive after the workshop. And we also have this in our website. So moving on to the actual protocol. I want to emphasize here that for those who maintain the trash trapper day to day, you don't have to do this by yourself. This is intended for your waste characterization partner, which can be a local volunteer group, NGO, or university in your area. Or, of course, if you are motivated and have the time, you are more than welcome to carry this out as well. So first, you need to empty out the contents of your trash capture device, weight it, and record this onto the data sheet, which we will review in the next slide. Once you recorded the weight, dump all the content onto a tarp and begin sorting through all the large litter. Here we define larger litter as anything bigger than 3 centimeters. So if you find any piece of plastics or water bottle, this is, or gloves, everything that's big, that more than 3 centimeters, this is a large debris. Once you remove all the large debris, large litter, and quantify and characterize it, you can then move to the next step, which is extracting the small litter, which we define as anything larger than 2 millimeters and smaller than 3 centimeters. So when we are doing the field work, we have this image on the left with the size, so our students they can see the size, and they can, if they are not sure what is a small debris or a small litter, they can go there and measure. So after that, you take 2 handfuls of the content leftovers after sorting through the large litter and place it into the bucket and rinse it in the water. So you have this pile of, in our case, a lot of organic. You have this pile of material, you collect it, you get it 2 full hands, put in the bucket, and then you carry out what we call as a French press technique, where you will place a sieve inside the bucket to separate the small litter from the other contents in the bucket. Then just dump it all into the 2 centimeter sieve. So you will put it there, the organic material with anthropogenic materials into the bucket, rinse it off, and all the plastics will float. Then you use the French press that you press the plant materials, and the only what we will have left is the plastic. And then you just dump this in our small sieve, and then you have to repeat this as many times as you need until you finish your content. After you washed all the materials, then depending on how much material present on your sieve, you subsample and quantify and characterize all the small debris. So you can see here we have 4 small piles. We pick one and we count everything that is inside this pile. And that's how you categorize and quantify all the materials that you have in your trap. So where do you record all this data? For now, you recorded it on a paper data sheet, which you will transfer onto this Excel spreadsheet, and then you send it to us so we can have a database. But in a couple of months, this will be incorporated into another app, which Sarah will explain to you next very soon. So the protocol and data sheet we will provide to you in the resource package and will be found on the network website. And before I pass to Sarah, I just want to say that we have tested this protocol with sieving and litter trap, and thus far they work and are very effective. And of course, we envision people across the globe, which are represented by this red star here, utilizing all the protocols and adapted them based on their device and the environment. So in that way, we could harmonize our data collection to compare it across sites and across the globe. And doing that, it will help us better inform the sources and types of litter we are diverting. With this data, we can implement change together. And hopefully we can all collect more data. And I will pass now to Sarah, who will explain where our data is going in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Rafaela. Thank you, Britta. Let me switch over to my screen now, doing the screen shuffle game today. All right. So I think you see a slide with some fish. Okay, good. Well, thank you both for setting up. You've made my job easy. I'm just the last person to chat with you all today about data collection. And based on some familiar names on the list, some of what I'm about to talk about may be review, but I do just want to discuss data collection, where we're headed with the ITTN, and how this kind of all fits under the larger umbrella of data collection that you may be more familiar with at the moment through volunteer, just traditional community science, beach or waterway cleanups. So our team has been working over the last year and a half, since the ITTN was established, to really think through how we might do this in a thoughtful way and how we might be able to have those data collected in a uniform manner across a lot of different types of devices, like what you just heard about from Rafa, through more of that detailed characterization from a smaller device like a bin, or how can we capture data collected from a big trash wheel, like what we heard from Robyn and Maddie, and discussing, some of the larger macro debris that are found through those types of devices. So it's a kind of a different type of cleanup, if you will, since these devices are cleaning 24/7. It's different from a beach cleanup. They're getting all the little stuff that Rafaela just talked about through kind of the French press method, and how you have to really try to kind of pull that out when you're doing your detailed characterization of your device. And then where can that all go? So that's where Ocean Conservancy's team can really step in, since we have a lot of experience housing and storing international coastal cleanup data. So we're really excited to kind of weave this type of cleanup, if you will, as a different route within our existing CleanSwell app. You may be familiar with it. If you're not, if you're brand new to it, feel free to, there's a QR codes there if you want to download it and kind of follow along as I talk here today. And if you're curious just about how the app works in general, we've got plenty of webinars on that that I'm happy to share links with as well, or quick tutorial videos. But just some quick information there on the screen that really is relevant for those sharing data collected through trash capture devices just in general. This app can be used anywhere. And I'm fairly certain that Data Trapper is the same in that, you don't really have to have cellular service even. It can store data on your device locally. And then when you get back in cellular range, those data automatically send off to a database. So we're really hoping to make it easier for you and your teams and maybe your partners that are going to do that more detailed characterization, so that they don't have to maybe use that paper data card that we just saw, and really can just enter it right into the app, click submit, and then it will go off into this online database that I will show you in a minute, that a few of you may be familiar with. But just first, a little bit about the app. It's about 6 years old. It's free. It's available to download on, and as you see, on Android and Apple devices. Just went through another kind of major update in May. As you might know, with experience with technology and apps, 5 years is already old. So we needed to do an update, and in this update, you'll see on the home screen, that's the screenshot there in the center of the slide. There's a little horizontal menu where you can switch and you can toggle around. You can do a traditional beach cleanup right away. There's a spot to record a past cleanup. That was kind of built in COVID, in case folks went out and did cleanups but didn't necessarily have their phone outside with them. That's a way to kind of record that data that you're finding. But then on the other side of that, you'll see there's a placeholder for data collected through trash capture devices. So this is a route not built in yet, but we're working with developers as we speak to kind of build in this methodology in a slightly different route and pathway of screens, if you will, within the app to capture those slightly different metrics, right? Some of the metrics you'll see on the next screen are similar, right? It's how many plastic PET bottles, how many plastic bottle caps, some of those larger debris items that we're used to capturing at a typical volunteer cleanup. But then there's a lot of other metrics with devices that are important to know too, like when was the last time that trash capture device was cleaned out? And if you're doing a subsampling, you know, needing to know like how full is that device? Is it half full? Is it full to the brim? Is it overflowing? So being able to capture some of those additional metrics will be built into this route on CleanSwell. When you first download the app, it does ask you to create an account. Once you're in, you're logged in, and the device is available in a number of languages as well, or the app is available in a number of languages as well. So we do get that question often. Hopefully it can be a tool useful for you know, a broader audience. And if you ever do have questions about the app and interest in having it available in other languages, please don't hesitate to reach out. It is important to allow location services to be turned on while the app is in use. So just like any other app, CleanSwell does ask you some privacy questions initially. It'll ask if you'll allow your camera, because there is a camera feature. So just like the Data Trapper app, you know, there is that opportunity to snap a photo of your trash capture device, maybe before, after, during your data characterization, but you do need to allow the camera on, and then making sure that location's turned on just ensures that we know exactly where in the world your data are being collected. So ideally, you'd be using the app and doing this data collection methodology right there at your capture device. Even if it happens after the fact, maybe a sorting area is away from your trap, we can definitely work with your team to make sure that the data are as close as possible to where your device is located. So a couple more screenshots here. These again are just from the traditional, like a beach or coastal cleanup that, you know, types of debris that volunteers would be picking up. So again, this is missing a lot of those micro plastics that we'll also hope to record through the ITTN. But just to give you a sense of how simple and streamlined we want this process to be, the trash capture device route in the app will look very similar to this, maybe having a few more questions like weather conditions and the date it was last cleaned, just like what I mentioned a minute ago. But what we do like about the structure that already exists is that we can build upon that for the device identification as well. So right now in the app, there's an area where you can plug in your group, like a group name. It might be your organization. I know I'm going to pick on Jamaica Environment Trust is on the line. So I think they put JET in their group name, like their acronym, and then you can add additional information beyond that, right? Maybe it's like JET beach cleanup at the go-kart track or something like that. And this could be used, we realized, with devices as well. So we'll probably put a few more identifying labels in that route. So you'll probably have a drop-down list where you can select the type of device that you're working with. Is it a band along? Is it a boom? Is it a DIY device? And we create that list based on members of the ITTN and who want to utilize the app and contribute their data that way. Oftentimes, each device has its own unique ID, so that could be put in the group name on the app, and it's just a further way to make sure that we can keep track of the different devices and be able to search in the database, maybe just for that specific device's data in the future. So where did the data go? This is our online database tides. Again, there's a whole webinar on this that I could talk for hours if those of you who know me and talk about the international coastal cleanup data. This is where all the data are housed, at least for the last 6 years plus, and data from CleanSwell app, data from any other kind of formats that come sent our way get entered into here. What we're really excited about is building in, from that trash capture data that we get through the ITTN, another way to visualize those data, not only among the other cleanup data that you might see globally here, but then to have a layer where you can kind of select and see only the data collected from trash capture devices. So if you're familiar with our database, there's some different color pins, like you might be able to see there's like a reddish pin up near Hudson Bay in Canada right now. That's like data that came in from a paper data card. But a little purple pin is from the app. So maybe there'll be another colored pin in the future that's from a trash capture device. So to just give you a sense of where it kind of falls under the larger umbrella of where we hope to house these data. And then lastly, this is my last slide, just tying in that group name feature and those identifying words that I mentioned earlier. It will be really helpful to work with you and your teams. Once you do have a device or maybe multiple devices established in your area, we can work with you to make sure that you have the kind of identifying words that you need in the app so that when you go into this online database, if you need to see, maybe you need to see all your data for the last season, or maybe it's the last calendar year, you can go in, quickly do the date filters and a lot of those other filters that already exist in Tides, but then also search for your particular device ID or name. So an example here, we do have one partner in Long Island, New York, who has a band along already. So you can see all I did was I started typing in band along in the group name field on the database, and their organization acronym and their band along bandit popped up. So I was able, I can click on that and then just see all of these reports that are available with just a couple clicks of a mouse right there at my fingertips. So summary reports, detailed entries, all the itemized data count, and there's all sorts of reports there in the system if you're not familiar with it, everything down to the people, the weight, the distance covered at a typical cleanup. But with ITTN, I think we're really going to have that unique report just for trash capture devices that has all those additional metrics that we're looking to capture. And then we'll be able to compare between, other trash capture devices that are out there globally by just kind of searching around through this existing database. I think that's all I have, and that really wraps our half-hour session. So I've added our team's contact information here if there are any follow-up questions. And I'm not sure how we're doing on time, if there might be some time for live questions or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Rafaela and Britta as well. It's not that we don't have time for questions, but I think what we're going to do is skip right to the next 30 seconds because Lakeram has to cut out early. And so we want to make sure we have everybody for the next part on operations and ownership, and then we'll do a full Q&A with everyone. So Hannah, I'll ask you to share your screen. We'll go straight into operations and ownership, and then we'll do a full group Q&A at the end.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. So we're now on to, well, we were session A, we mixed things around a little bit. So we're the third session talking about ownership and operations. So myself, Chelsea and Lakeram will be discussing all the different considerations that are needed for ownership and operation, and drawing up, I'll be asking for them to draw up on their experiences so far throughout. So you've met all of us already, so I will skip past these introductions, but just as a reminder, this is who we are and our relative organizations. Okay, so ownership and operation. Really, we're going to be talking about practical experiences in ownership and operation of trash traps. So installation, before you actually get the trap and when it's installed, things to consider while the device is functioning, and then finally some of the other benefits that you can have from trash traps in addition to what we've already discussed. So at this point, we want to just ask all of you a quick question. So in your different scenarios, who would you expect to be purchasing the device in your different scenarios? So Chelsea, while people are answering, do you want to give an example from your side of things of how it
Sure.
works?
For our traps, it was basically Ports Toronto started. So they purchased the first few, and then they started a collaboration where they would basically have other people sort of sponsor the trap. So the Toronto Zoo purchased a trap. There's a local airport right in the waterfront, the small airport, they purchased a trap. The Toronto Region Conservation Authority purchased a trap, and the city purchased some of our traps. So Ports Toronto sort of like owns and operates them, but they've been paid for by diverse stakeholders. And so that's a nice way to kind of spread the butter if you don't have like a big pot of funding for traps.
Mm-hmm. Mary Beth's answered the question. So in their scenario, it'd be a corporate sponsor to them or sponsored by a grant. So yeah, I think that would be also another situation for lots of groups too. Okay. I'm going to move on. Oh, was there another comment in the chat? No, we're all good. Okay. So in thinking about that, that's a good example. Thank you, Chelsea. There are lots of different stakeholders to consider. So the first is who's going to purchase the device, but there's also other ones, so who will be maintaining the device. And Rafaela already covered this, but Just as a reminder, who will be maintaining, who will be collecting the waste? Do you have a plan for using the device for local education programs or engagement? And if so, are there any other partner organizations that you can team up with? So the reason we mention this is because, as we've said, it's important to consider all the options for stakeholders right at the very start. And this is so that everyone is involved in the planning process and we make sure that everyone's happy with their roles in the short and long term. And this means that your project is much more likely to be successful and sustainable as well. So we'll dig into some more of these questions throughout this session. So to follow up on the stakeholders discussion, here's a list of some examples of stakeholders that might need to be involved in the trash trapping project. So examples include governments, businesses, universities, and one I also wanted to touch on is device manufacturers. So often in getting in touch with different device manufacturers, it could lead to collaboration. Often sometimes they might, if you're an environmental NGO and they're aware of your work, they might offer a discount for certain organizations if you're part of a project or a larger program. So that's also important to consider. So reaching out to the device manufacturers as well as everyone else who's actually going to be using the device or involved in the device on the ground is an important thing to consider. So moving on from stakeholders, we go to installation. So beyond who's involved, there are a few things to plan for in terms of what the project requires for installation. So when you plan for your installation of the trash trap, there are three main elements where you need to focus. And I think Lakeram gave us a really great run through of these things. So understanding and knowing the site, knowing and understanding the device and how it works, and also remembering that installation isn't the end of the process. So you have to think ahead to when the product is actually in use. And in understanding where you're installing it, this is just another example of the visual audit data that we used in Toronto. So using the visual audit protocol, you can understand where your litter is accumulating and acknowledging that each site is unique. So for one location, it might be totally different to another. And you can consider the pros and cons of each site and think about the environment and use of the waterway. So in thinking about this, you can consider the pros and cons of each site. So pros would be there's a lot of trash there and it's really easy to access. Cons could be that there's boat activity or users in certain sites and local wildlife or sensitive species living and inhabiting that area. And other things could be access to the site and permissions you might need. So at this point, I just want to pause and ask Lakeram just for a little insight into what he's learned through their process of planning for the trash trap installation in Georgetown. So was there any unforeseen considerations that you realized throughout the planning process so far?
Yeah, all right, so thanks for that. And thanks to the presenters so far, great presentations throughout the day. Related to that, especially to the device in itself, like if you just think like one scenario, I think, and we had these conversations in the past couple of months, the first site that I showed, it looked like it was simple because the environment was, it was very built up with concrete and so on. And it looked like it would be so simple to install a device. But then after further conversation, and you realize that the installations around the drainage canal were actually private. So we couldn't exactly interact with it. That would require us to have like an MOU with the private, the owner of the land and the owner of the infrastructure. The second site was also managed, but it's it's governmental. But then we had to consider, apparently that area there was already earmarked for more construction of like docks and wharves, because for infrastructure works. And so they didn't want any structures in the area that would inhabit passage of like small vessels or putting down like the buoys or the buoys, as some people call them, to the anchor vessels. And the third site, that was different from the other two because of the the embankment, because if it's all clay, and we had to weigh the pros and cons. Is it easier or is it safer to use a build structure as an anchor for the device, or would it be better to just anchor the device in the dirt, so in case that it has to be moved in the event of future development activities in the area, it would be simpler to move it rather than putting it down concretely in an area. Yeah, I think right now in terms of Georgetown there's so many things are happening infrastructure wise. A lot of drainage areas are being upgraded, and so they're actually they're moving away from the dirt drain, the mud drainage canals, to more concrete structures. For some reason, I guess maybe it's easier to clean or easier to maintain in that regard. So all of those things we had to contend with. And so in some cases, maybe countryside areas might be better because they would have less prevalence of concrete structures and a less rate of infrastructural change in the area. But yeah, and all of this has to do, and all this can be quelled once you do the right stakeholder engagement too. And actually, while you guys were speaking, I actually got a message from my contact at the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority. And so I quickly called him and told him, that I was at this workshop here, and telling him that we're actually speaking about the same thing. And he actually, when I get back to Guyana next week, he's agreed to meet me next week in person with his supervisor, so we can actually get it straight which is the location that we're using. And they also want me to do a bit more presentation on the device to some of their other colleagues who would like to know more about it as well. So many things you have to take into consideration when it comes to the physical site. That not maybe unique, that, as you said, the site is unique, so there's different stakeholder engagement and so much geographical aspects to take into consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great insight. Thank you, Lakeram. And I think it shows how your project definitely shows how you can start off with a certain idea of what you might want, what you might envisage to happen, but that as you speak to different people and learn different things, the project can kind of turn in different directions and grow. But that's all part of the fun, I think, and all part of the understanding the local environment. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so moving on from thinking about the location is thinking about the device. So we've mentioned a lot of these devices so far today. But yeah, as we mentioned, it's really important to do your homework and learn about the product. So understanding whether you want something that might be a passive device or an active device, thinking about functionality and maintenance and cost. So does it need a power source, for example? Does the device have moving parts? And these are things that are really great to think about in terms of what device you get and where you put it. And so in both cases, it's really useful also to try and get your hands on the device, or at least see one in action. Or what we hope to happen through the network is to maybe speak to someone else who's used that device already, and to understand their experience with it, and then get to know it a bit more through that. And this will all help you plan for the installation. So is it an easy installation, a 2-person lift to put it in the water, or does it require a crane or some other infrastructure to install? Does it have any moving parts or consumables? Does it require electricity? Is the site that you want to put it in, does that have access to electricity for your device? And how often do you need to access the site for maintenance, and so on? So it's all questions you can ask device manufacturers or other groups that have used similar devices. And these all impact how well the device functions, and will also likely impact your operating costs and the amount of time that you spend with the device, if these are all properly considered. So all good things to note. And one final thing to note on installation is that once the device is in place, it doesn't end there. So in addition to ensuring that installation goes smoothly, it's great to check in periodically on it. And once it's installed, see how it's functioning, if there are any mechanical issues that need fixing. We had a great example last week in our workshop with groups in West Africa. Our guest speaker, Toshka from Sustainable Seas Trust, was mentioning they were checking in weekly on their device, and they actually found that they had to remove their device and try a different type. They had a trash boom that they'd installed, and they tried a different design that worked a bit better. So it's all kind of adapting to how it's actually functioning in practice. And doing these things and making sure it's all set up properly will set you up for success afterwards. And so, as I mentioned, with the network, we hope that we can help groups troubleshoot any issues with traps, can reach out to other groups via our social media channels or our Facebook group, or reach out to us and we can connect you to the right people who might have experienced similar issues. Lakeram, did you want to contribute?
Yes, I just wanted to backtrack to the one where you were mentioning the devices that require power source.
Yes.
So I did consider it at one point because we have a lot of business places very close to the canals that we could approach possibly to provide power for our devices. But because the areas are not exactly, you wouldn't put them in a category as a planned city or a planned where a lot of the things would have been considered. So getting power to some of the areas, not only a challenge but a security issue in terms of running cables from places, from buildings to the area, and the safety of them when it comes to the weekend and we don't have any traffic in the area in terms of people walking and going to work and so on, So we did look at electronic installation. Probably if there's a solar alternative that's also cheap, probably later on we can look at that. But yeah.
No, that's great insight. Thank you. The options are there. Okay, so moving on to maintenance and operations. So once your device is installed and you have it all working properly, it's also a good time to think about the long-term maintenance and operation. So often groups will choose to install a device in a public location, which is great for education outreach opportunities. But this, as Layton's already mentioned, actually leads to further considerations about who has access to the site or if there are any threats for vandalism or theft. And so your considerations could include how easy is it for people to access the device in the water? Does it have any valuable parts that might be subject to theft? And how can you best protect your device from these situations? And in addition to keeping your device safe, you also need to make sure that people who need to get access to the device, so people who are doing the maintenance and the data collection and the waste collection, can do this easily. So that means communicating with stakeholders who will be accessing the device for maintenance and data collection to ensure that they have everything they need and a clear plan for how often the device will be emptied, who is doing that, and what will happen to the waste once it's removed from the trap. So having a clear and mutually agreed maintenance plan is really important as well. And this leads me on to thinking about our example from Toronto and our sea bins. So Chelsea, I was wondering if you could just quickly explain the situation with the U of T trash team and Ports Toronto with the sea bin maintenance.
Sure. And I think this has been the most important part of making sure we have a successful program, is making sure there are people to empty the bin, fix the bins if they are broken or become unplugged, if we have an electricity issue, and also then that the data is quantified and characterized. So as U of T trash team, we had offered to do all the quantification and characterization, and it became really clear that it was going to be really difficult for us to continue to get information on days where we weren't there, because the actual people who worked at the marinas weren't very good at consistently taking data, but more importantly, they weren't very good at consistently taking out the garbage in the bins. And if the bins aren't taken out every day, then that can actually cause harm to the bin. So one of the most important things we've realized is that it's not just, as Hannah said, buy a trap and throw it in the water, but have a secured team who can empty them and operate them. And then very important, we think, is to do data characterization and collection. So right now we're emptying the traps and that's fine. But again, think about who you want to actually physically empty them. Some traps you don't have to empty daily. The sea bins, we do. The litter traps we empty once a month and the city helps us. Those are really easy. So yeah.
That's true. And it seems as though, like, as well as knowing who's doing what and working with all the different stakeholders in the process, whoever's collecting the data, making sure that they understand the point of the data collection and why we're doing it, and the bigger picture as well, so they know what the data is going to be used for. I think that really helps to give everyone the motivation to keep doing it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And we're super successful at this now, but I think this was our biggest growing pains, was figuring that out, and now we've got it down, but it took a couple of years. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all part of the process. So in thinking about trap emptying and data collection, we've mentioned the protocols, the ITTN protocols throughout the process, and just a note here, they can be adapted for different devices. So currently we have a lot of smaller devices in the network, but we hope that as we grow and we get different groups involved, there'll be large devices. So a part of this will also be, if you do join the network, we'll be working with us to adapt those methods, making sure that they work for you and your device, and making data collection as easy, as simple as possible for whoever is doing it. So that is all part of the process. Okay, so we've heard that there is a lot more to owning a trash trapping device than just installation and occasional emptying, or putting it in the water and that being the end of the job. Installation might include electrical installation costs, tools and staff time. Maintenance might be done daily, weekly or monthly, and it requires equipment and staff time or volunteer time, or it might require the purchase of infrastructure to remove the waste and track what's being tracked. Consumables might include energy consumption and things that you use for cleanup, so garbage bags, replacement parts, and equipment for daily maintenance. And also, we haven't mentioned this that much, but waste disposal can also come with costs, so both financial and potentially environmental. So often the waste that you're going to be collecting in this trap has been in the water for a while and might not be recyclable, but it's good to have a plan, especially if you've got a kind of device that is collecting a large amount of waste, of where that waste is going to go after you've collected it. So it might be a case of you have an agreement with your local municipality that you leave it in a certain area and it gets collected at regular intervals. Or there might be some other plant that you work in to collect and take the waste to a waste management facility, because what we don't want is to clean up the waste and then it end up back in the environment straight away. That wouldn't be good for any of us. So that's one thing that is also a great consideration. Okay, I think, benefits. So it might feel like I thought we were finished, but we have one more thing to think about, which we can chat about. So this might feel like a lot to consider, but we think it's worth it for the benefits that come with trapping trash. And we've mentioned obviously 3 main benefits that we want to focus on with the network, which is cleanup, education and awareness, and obviously data collection to inform management. But there's other benefits as well. So we've had examples where trash traps can help with the cleanup of small oil spills, such as oily bilge water if they have an absorbent filter like the sea bin does. They can also help to collect stray fishing line that might otherwise get caught in boat propellers. We touched on this earlier, they can help clean up invasive plant species, and that can improve the appearance and health of your local waterway. They can also help you in obtaining green certifications, such as International Blue Flag and Clean Marine programs. And they can also help demonstrate to the community your commitment to the environment, which in turn reflects positively on your organisation. And all importantly, as I mentioned, they contribute to important research by measuring our impact and informing local source reduction and solutions for plastic pollution. So by understanding what we're capturing and collecting all of this data, we hope that through the network and through all of your individual products, we can really understand where all the waste is coming from and what we can do about it on various different scales and in different locations. So any final words from Chelsea or Lakeram before we finish our session?
Yes, I think when it comes to ownership, especially, it really helps to bring in as much persons as possible and to really have their roles and responsibilities already started out, instead of having to have it's good to have consultation to know where persons can fit in. But in our case, because we're in Georgetown, you know, there's so many schools around, and you had mentioned this before, but this is actually something that we already did, is to inform schools about the trash trap, and persons were very very intrigued by it. But I can say, to see how the devices were working in different scenarios, and they did ask how can we get one in Guyana. And so we kind of told them, you know, we plan to have one and see how it works in our situation. So, and I think in terms of ownership, while you may not have a legal document to say, well, hey, I own this, it's mine, you know, it becomes owned by all of the persons, all of the stakeholders that had a part to play. And I think being part of it helps to bridge that connection onto the device, and it starts to help to foster a little more acceptability from a wider population when you want to upscale the initiative to larger areas and to have a greater impact. So, you know, that would be my final comments for this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, Lakeram. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to work with different stakeholders from different industries as well. So it can really, yeah, I totally agree. It's a great way to bridge that connection.
I agree with all of that. I'll just add that although this particular part can seem overwhelming a bit, it's all totally worth it. And as Lakeram just said, building your stakeholder team is really important. And once you have your group together, that's the best part of it, is the collaboration. So it's just really important to build those connections, know who will do what, and then you can have fun with it. So
for sure. Okay, we have one final question before we finish, which is, and you can write your answers in the chat. After thinking about all of this and learning about all the ins and outs today, what is the main reason why you think you would like a trash trap in your local areas? Is it litter collection, outreach, to be more sustainable as an organisation, to connect different stakeholders? Let us know what you're thinking.
While people are answering that, Lakeram, I know you have somewhere to go, so I just want to tell you a huge thank you. It's been a big honor to have you host this with us. And if you do have to drop out at any time, just go ahead. So thank you so much. And don't feel bad if you have to just hang up.
All right. Well, thanks to you guys as well. It's been really good having conversations with Hannah and Sarah. And I see so many of you more that we could have more collaboration with. And we'll definitely be in contact. And having this webinar here for the gives me a further push to make sure we get these things rolled out before the end of the year, so that, you know, we could see tangible benefits soon enough. So I'll probably pop out now. Do have an event to get to, and thanks so much once again to all of you for attending, for hosting, and for coordinating the event. And we'll be in contact, I'm sure, sooner than later. Take care then.
Thank
Bye.
you, Lakeram. Thank you so much. Okay, so while we were chatting, we got some answers in the chat from reasons why people would like a trash trap. So I will read some of them out now. So collection and outreach, connecting with new and different stakeholders, absolutely. Garbage removal and raising public awareness. Improving waste management and the governance around it. Yeah. All great reasons. To reduce litter blocking waterways, resulting in less flooding during heavy rains. That's a really great point as well, because not only is the litter an eyesore, but it can have other impacts such as that too. So that's actually a really good point. Sustainable collection, agreed with flood reduction. Yeah, so the flood reduction aspect is definitely something that is an important consideration. Improving waste management and to continue with the beautification of the environment. Agreed. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. Okay, so Chelsea, we are finished. So I might wrap up, or do we want to have some more questions? If anyone had questions for Sarah and Britta and Rafaela, because we skipped their question portion. So if anyone has any quick questions, we can answer those before we move on.
Yes, I have a question.
Of course, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I just recently came through an Italian group that uses barcode technology for their waste bins, and they have their compactors, underground waste management systems. Is it already in practice in your place?
I don't think we have. You're saying a barcode for
Barcode for the biodegradable and non-biodegradable plastics at source.
Oh.
Okay, so you identify already.
Yeah,
whether
so in the
right?
city of Toronto, they don't accept the biodegradables. And
then
I
you
think
have this, I'm sorry, then you have this barcode systems to identify the type of trash, the weight, the description, you know, before it goes to the landfill.
we do, I think at the materials recovery facility, is that what you're talking about? Like when it comes through on the belt, then they'll use the barcode to tell what type of plastic it is and determine whether it's recyclable or not.
No,
Is that what you're
actually,
thinking about?
on source, we have bins.
Uh-huh.
Okay, the bins already is barcoded. So you have the history of the trash on that particular sites because it's site specific.
Okay.
Right? There is no site that is not, each site is unique.
Oh, you mean bins on the street? Like
Yeah, on the street.
Okay, garbage bins. No, we don't have any. We just have a regular garbage and recycling bins on the street. But would be a good idea to have one that has a barcode when you can scan and let them know if it's recyclable or garbage. Is that what your
Yes, something like that. It's like you know, there is a big thing like in UAE, in Abu Dhabi, there are high-rise buildings and there are Natur. Natur is the guardian, the you know, the one in charge for safety and security and for waste management. So these are RFID controlled bins and site compactors, you know, the underground waste collection system.
Yeah, so the one that under the bin there is a big hole where they compact the litter.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I know what you're
Where
talking
there
about.
is a control room, and each site has a SIM card, and it's talking to the control room, telling the control room that I'm already full and get me. Then two trucks will come, one with the empty one, and one will pull out the already full compacted trash. Right? But it's all monitored in the control room. So the control room is interface with the land transfer station. Then again, it is weighed in the transfer station before it goes to the landfill.
This is interesting.
Yeah, we don't have that.
No, we don't have that. So I think
Great.
thank you for sharing. Let us know.
We can link, right, with the Italian and the Portuguese people who in fact, it's been here since 2011.
Oh, okay. Well, please share that with us afterwards. You can email us.
Yeah, because
at info@trashtrapnetwork.org and just let us know more. I think we have another question. Terrell's had his hand up, had their hand up for a little while, so please go ahead and unmute and let us know your question, just so we can fit everyone in.
All right, good. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Let me know. Can you guys hear me clearly?
We can, yeah.
All right. This question is pertaining to the Clean Swell app. I realized since the update that retrieving past information, that capability seems not to be available anymore. So for example, if I am to go back and get data from a past cleanup, I no longer have the ability to do that. And that's very helpful when it comes to, okay, looking at, say, how many plastic bottles were collected. It just gives like a general, how many items and how many pounds. Is there a way to retrieve that data now? Maybe something the team with the app could look at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terrell. I can take this one, team. You're exactly right. There used to be a way, I think in the first iteration of CleanSwell, where you could just see your overall like item totals, like you were talking about, like how many plastic bottles have I entered across all of my cleanups. If you really want, yeah, and the new version does not have that, because really if you're looking for detailed data, the best move is to go to the online database that I was calling in my presentation. We call it TIDES, but happy to connect with you offline and share all sorts of information, because you're exactly right. We want to make sure that whatever data are collected by your teams, whether it is just normal cleanups or through the devices, are accessible to you. So really, ideally, you'd go onto the online database, and in the app, we're not really, at least at the moment, we don't have a way to go in and see all of your past entries or edit or delete those. That's all done on the database. So let's definitely connect afterwards, and I can send you some instructions as well about the database. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I think you have one final one, Hannah, in the chat from Mary Beth that says she'd love to see us share some best ideas on the messaging, social media, and publicity. I think, Maddie, you're still on. Can I spotlight you and you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I was just looking at that in the chat. Thanks, Mary Beth. I think we'll be sharing our presentations on this as a resource for all of the workshop attendees after the fact, so you can always go back to what we presented on. In general, I don't think there's like a singular answer to this question. It's very dependent on your location, your device, and the audience you're trying to connect with. But generally speaking, you know, I think you want to have as much messaging prepped and ready to go as possible. Be ready for any questions you might get. You know the audience, get creative, sort of just general answers, I know, but we'd be happy to connect offline. If you have any more specific questions, I'd be happy to help.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, everything will be, the workshop recording will be available online, so you can go back and rewatch all the great info that Maddie and Robyn shared about what their experiences have been with engagement and messaging and social media as well, so you can always go back and watch that. But thank you. Okay, we are slightly ahead of time. Oh, Shay has a question, so go ahead and unmute yourself, Shay, and go ahead and ask.
Well, it's not really a question. I just wanted to give a heartfelt thank you to all of you for such an informative session. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to say that. Thank
you very much. We appreciate you saying that as well. That you
You're
put a
welcome.
smile on everyone's faces. Okay, so we'll quickly just finish up. I might share my screen and just share. I just got a couple of last thank you slides to everyone before we finish. If that's okay. Does that sound good?
All good. All good.
Okay. Bear with me, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. Okay. So, share screen. So really, we just wanted to wrap up and have a kind of semi-formal wrap up, just to say a big thank you to everyone. So firstly, on behalf of Lakeram, who has just dropped off the call, but we're really grateful for him and attending the workshop. Thank you to all of you for attending as well, and for the really great conversations that we've had today. It's been fantastic. So thank you everyone for attending and hanging with us for the whole 5 hours. And also thank you to the rest of the ITTN team from me as well for presenting and sharing your knowledge and your experience. So thank you very much. And just finally, I'll share this in the chat as well before we drop off, in case someone is interested. But for those of you who are interested in joining the ITTN, it's just a quick reminder that all you need to do is let us know. So you can contact us via our email address, and you can ask us any further information you need. On our webpage, we have all of our resources. We have our protocols and some videos as well, like Rafa showed, of how to use all the different methods that we have. We have our Facebook group, so you can connect with other groups globally. Even if you don't have a track yet, you're just thinking about it, you can join the Facebook group and ask any questions that you have and stay in touch. And we also have a mailing list, which we'll send out the link to as well in the chat, and you can join our mailing list to keep in touch with the ITTN and keep updated in what we're doing. So I'm not going to do the last question. I think we're going to finish there because I'm happy with the chat. So thank you. Oh, I didn't share the final thing, but thank you very much to everyone. I'll quickly just share all the links in the chat. My screen's gone strange now, which is very handy. But yeah, just a big thank you to everyone really for taking part today. I think it's been a really great and informative workshop, and I hope that everyone stays in touch. And I hope that we'll see many of you and keep in touch in the future as part of the International Trash Trap Network and hear all about your fantastic projects. So I just posted in the chat all the links that you might need. We'll also follow up afterwards with a resource package with all those links in there as well. Yeah, echoing what Rafa said, thank you for spending the day with us.
Thanks, Hannah. It was great to meet everybody. Thanks for being so engaging. It's great.
Yes, thanks everyone. And thanks, Tred, for being in the tech today and helping us with all the technology behind the workshop.
Yes, absolutely. Tred's been working hard behind the scenes.
That's right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.